Good afternoon. Welcome back. Dear colleagues, next we will hear to the statements from the Supreme Audit Institutions invited to the G20. Starting with SAI Angola, to whom I kindly pass the floor to President Sebastião Gunza.
Muito obrigado, distinto presidente Bruno Dantas, presidente do TCU e da SAI. Eu vou comunicar em português, afinal a língua fala neste país, e é por isso que nessa minha introdução defendo que português seja também ela língua de trabalho na SAI. Penso que português merece ser língua de trabalho na SAI por várias razões. A primeira das quais é que ela tem mais de 250 milhões de falantes. E ela está representada em cerca de 4 continentes. Português parece-me ser uma língua importante no contexto universal, no contexto do mundo, e não pode, acho eu, não pode ficar a par. Distintos chefes das delegações aqui presentes, sintam-se todos cumprimentados. Creio que agora, após o almoço, já se pode dizer a todos boa tarde. A SAI agora agradece imenso o convite para a sua participação neste honroso evento, com importante relevância singular, assistida pelos temas de hoje. A Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza, que inclua compromissos nacionais, financeiros e técnicos, aberta à participação.
Nada, mano. Não tá, mas só não tá chegando pra eles.
Cara,
me dá um. Aqui. Me dá teu fone lá, aquele adaptador.
Agora não levou. G20 que aqui representamos, espera-se que efetivamente se defina claramente o significado de uma transição energética
Energy transition just indicative, and we can advance crucial issues regarding the implementation of mechanisms to work on the urgency of the climate change. And using paraphrases, the President Bruno Dantas, Angola has initiated a wide program in renewable energy, as well as programs to fight against poverty and hunger. And environmental sustainability, Angola has to supervise all the programs and projects, governmental projects. Our President, João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, is the most committed figure with these programs and with these projects. Esteemed President and friend Bruno Dantas, your presidency has been sincerely remarkable, positive, and I want to highlight. I mean, I'm looking forward to the presidency of SAI will soon go to another geography, which is mine geography. That is South Africa, which is a broader country, which capital is located a 3-hour trip from its capital, from my country, Angola, the capital of my country, Angola.
And help wherever necessary. We are very interested. Angola, beyond being a guest, will be an effective member of this respected organization. And I believe that the SAI is just one of the international organizations with more members than the United Nations. So I believe because of that deserves all our respect, that all the members are effectively brought together. We have agendas that are similar to each other. Those are about fighting hunger and climate changes. In this sense, seems like the world is perfectly lined up. It's perfect. And those agendas we need to transmit to our state. And finally, I'll say it again and publicly that President Bruno Dantas accept here now the invitation to visit my country is still during this year. To the other members, though the agenda outlined for this event, I think they deserve our remarks. All of them are very important and very relevant for. I believe it's very important to congratulate the organization, the highly, very well directed by President Bruno Dantas. I thank you for the speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President
Muito
Sebastião
obrigado,
Gunza,
Presidente
for
Sebastião.
your kind words. I now pass the floor to the next INTOSAI chair, our colleague from SAI Egypt, Mr. Hesham Badawi.
السيد رئيس الجهاز الأعلى للرقابة بالبرازيل برونو دانتاس رئيس القمة، السادة رؤساء الأجهزة العليا للرقابة لدى مجموعة ال20، السادة رؤساء الأجهزة العليا للرقابة المدعوون للقمة، السيدات والسادة الحضور، أهدي لكم أطيب التحية معربا عن بالغ اعتزازي بمشاركتكم أعمال هذه القمة في ظل التحديات العالمية المتزايدة والتوقيت بالغ الدقة لوضع دولي عالمي يشهد توترات متزايدة لها عواقبها بعيدة المدى على الاقتصاد العالمي، إضافة لما تتعرض له بلدان النامية من آثار سلبية لتغير المناخ المتعلقة بالتصحر وندرة المياه والموارد الطبيعية، الأمر الذي يتطلب المزيد من جهودنا حيث أصبح العمل الرقابي أكثر أهمية من أي
Because our work is very important and auditing is more important than ever before. It gives me great pleasure to be present among you and to represent the Supreme Audit Institution of Egypt and the African Union Board of External Auditors at SAI20. This platform, that since its launch in Indonesia in 2022, it's convening India in 2023, now here in Brazil, has always sought to be a forum to discuss the increasing global challenges facing the G20 countries. These challenges must be discussed and we need cooperation to fulfill objectives and hunger and poverty. Those challenges to contribute to strengthen the relationships and the SDGs. And based on those objectives, in our agenda to 2050 in Egypt, and the African Agenda 2063, when we worked with many partners, and we came to Brazil with many challenges. Among the most prominent, addressing the climate crisis through innovative financing mechanisms, promoting renewable energy projects, creating the coordination and consistency in fighting hunger, poverty, and the negative effects of the crisis. We need to contribute to bring, through our discussions, tackling the topics that we address here in this summit, today we confirm the importance of those issues and the importance of cooperation. The community, the international community needs to join its efforts to create advances and bring answers to all the challenges, all the issues. And we expect those preoccupations to be voted in the final communique that will be adopted tomorrow. Thus, this meeting is very important to the realization of this communique and the ideas that we want to exchange regarding this climate crisis will enable us to create mechanisms of cooperation we need to increase and our presence today reflects our commitment to fight the political challenges that are a consequence of the global change in the world and our country. I'd like to express our gratitude and our thanks for the organization of the summit. Thank you very much.
Shukran. Thank you so much, Mr. Badawi, for your words. And now I want to kindly pass the floor to our colleague from SAI Poland, Mr. Marian Banaj.
Distinguished dear guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marian Banaj and I am the President of the Supreme Audit Office of Poland. I am most grateful for being invited here for the summit of the SAIs20. It is a very important event to discuss and prepare to audit the public money spent by our governments on energy transition and fighting poverty. The money that is used by our governments comes from the taxes paid by the people. Therefore, a lot of pressure is put on us, on independent audit authorities to provide credible data and on how money is spent. Energy transition is of crucial importance in Poland. It is estimated that 350 billion euro will be spent on energy transition in Poland until the years 2040. A lot of money, but a lot of important tasks, as because of the weather in Poland, we have to spend a lot of resources to heat our houses in winter and cool them in summer. As the chair of the EuroSAI working group on environmental auditing, we are making this topic vital. My office focuses on the audit of public policies towards fighting poverty. This issue is also very important and difficult to deal with. However, in the last year in Poland, we reached levels below 7% of people in poverty in Poland. Governmental helps is of crucial importance to identify, help, and activate people in need. Once again, thank you for being here and being able to contribute to our joint task. Thank you, Minister Bruno, for invitation, and see you again next year in South Africa. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banaj. I want now to pass the floor to SAI Portugal, Mr. Fernando Oliveira Silva. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Caro Presidente, distintos colegas, permitam-me que fale em português, a língua do nosso maior poeta Luís Vaz de Camões, no ano em que se comemoram os 500 anos do seu nascimento.
Since in the year we celebrate 500 years since he was born, it's one of the most spoken languages in the world. We have met here with more than 200 million inhabitants in Brazil. This is a place that I would like to present my greetings from our President, José Tavares, because due to some commitments that he has, he cannot be here today. Regarding the declaration, Portugal would like to say that the Federal Court of Accounts in Portugal would like to be participating as an observer and with its brother Brazil, and this way we can contribute to the formation of the declaration and the communique that will be presented and validated in this annual meeting of the SAI20 Summit, and afterwards will be presented to G20. The interconnected topics, the climate financing and the fight against hunger and poverty are urgent, and our Court of Accounts has to audit in this issue, in this specific context with the Portuguese reality. Our previous meetings held online and in Brasilia, in person, we could make it possible to exchange experiences and knowledge about the topics, allowing us at the same time to narrow the relationship between the countries. Initiatives like that will amplify the relevance and the prestige of our institutions of superior control in the national, regional, and global plans, and put us in the front line of the process of controlling the governmental actions. We are convicted that the work we are developing in these institutions that will become in this declaration represents the most valia and very important documents, so that the governments can promote effectively actions, more efficient action to fight against the climate crisis, the hunger and poverty. You are congratulate you. A final word to thank you, the warm welcome.
Muito obrigado. Thank you so much, Mr. Fernando Oliveira Silva. I now pass the floor to the SAI United Arab Emirates, Mr. Khalid Al-Ebse.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency Humaid Ubaid Abu Shabs, the President of UAE SAI, I would like to express our gratitude for the hospitality and organization of the SAI Summit here in Belém. We always receive a warm welcome by our friends and partners in Brazil, which is a testament to the strong and long-standing bilateral relationship that our two countries share. It is a great honor to address you today at the SAI20 Summit here in Belém. This gathering signifies our collective commitment to addressing some of the most urgent challenges of our time: climate finance, energy transitions, and the fight against hunger and poverty. For nearly 2 decades, the UAE has placed climate action at the center of its foreign policy and economic strategy, guided by the visionary leadership of our President, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. We believe that investment in decarbonization drives economic growth, job creation, and societal stability. Our recent hosting of COP28 was a landmark event showcasing our leadership in global climate action. The historic UAE climate agreement adopted at COP28 brought together 198 parties in united effort to accelerate climate action and strive to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This agreement calls for comprehensive transition from fossil fuel and establishes a robust climate finance framework to support these global initiatives. In alignment with these global commitments, the UAE has set an ambitious target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030, moving towards our long-term goal of achieving net zero emissions by 2050. This progressive approach underscores our dedications to climate action and sustainable development. Our renewable energy projects such as Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Solar Park and Al Dhafra Solar Project highlight our commitment to clean energy. Furthermore, the UAE National Hydrogen Strategy positions us at the forefront of clean energy innovation, emphasizing hydrogen as a key component of our future energy mix. This strategy aims to make hydrogen a cornerstone of our energy sector, furthering our commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emission and promoting sustainable energy practices. Beyond our border, the UAE has been a significant supporter of global development through substantial foreign aid. From 20 to 22, the UAE provided over 9.31 billion US dollar in foreign aid, helping to build resilient communities and promote economic stability in some of the most challenged regions worldwide, or threatened regions worldwide. In our ongoing fight against hunger and poverty, the UAE launched 1 billion meal campaign in March 23. This ambitious initiatives aim to provide essential food aid to underserved communities globally. Our partnership with the United Nations World Food Programme continues to deliver critical relief to those affected by conflict and climate change. As we convene here, it is crucial to recognize the interconnected nature of climate change and poverty. These are not isolated challenges, but intertwined crises that demand a comprehensive and coordinated approach. Supreme Audit Institutions play a vital role in ensuring transparency, accountability, and efficiency in the policies designed to tackle these issues. The SAI20, under the Brazil's exemplary leadership, embodies the collaborative spirit necessary to drive global change. Our efforts here will significantly contribute to the G20 dialogues, reinforcing the need for effective, inclusive, and sustainable policies. Climate financing is essential for empowering nations to adopt green technologies and build resilience. The equitable distribution of resources and the transparent utilization of funds are paramount in our collective endeavor to mitigate the adverse effect of climate change. The UAE Accountability Authority remains committed to supporting the Sustainable Development Goals, ensuring that resources are used efficiently and reach those most in need. The draft communique we are set to adopt encapsulates our collective vision. It urges government to take comprehensive action, integrating social, environment, economic, and financial indicators. Our recommendations aim to foster policies that encourage investment, set measurable standards, and promote sustainable practices. Let us use this opportunity to reinforce our commitment to those global imperatives through our collective wisdom and collaborative efforts, we can drive meaningful progress and ensure that our voice resonates in the G20 and beyond. Together, we can build a future that is sustainable, just, and prosperous for all. In conclusion, we would like again to thank Brazil for hosting this event, the UAE, and we would like to emphasize that the UAE unwavering dedication to these causes remains steadfast. We are ready to collaborate, innovate, and lead in the pursuit of a better world for future generations. Let us make the most of this summit and set a powerful precedent for the years to come. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khalid, for your words. And after the statements of the Supreme Audit Institutions invited to the G20, now it's time to hear from the Supreme Audit Institutions invited by TCU to participate the SAI20 this year. We will start hearing the chair of SAI Azerbaijan, who will host this year in November the COP29. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, dear colleagues, dear valued members of SAI20, on behalf of the Chamber of Accounts of the Republic of Azerbaijan,
Nós saudamos cada de vocês, temos prazer.
This event in Belém. First of all, we would like to thank Mr. Bruno Dantas, President of the Court of Accounts of the Federal Republic of Brazil and the Chairman of SAI, for your support to participate in the SAI20 Summit. This is the first time that the Chamber of Accounts of the Republic of Azerbaijan participated in the SAI20 Summit as an observer. And once again, we would like to express our deep gratitude on behalf of our management and organization. As you know, the SAI20 Summit aims to strengthen discussions on pressing global issues such as the climate crisis and energy transitions and poverty reduction, especially to G20 leaders to review the perspectives of Supreme Audit Institutions on these issues. Today, with our participation in the event, we will bring to your attention the activities carried out on inclusive energy transitions in the Republic of Azerbaijan. As you know, the Brazilian SAI, which chairs SAI, together with the Working Group on Environmental Auditing of SAI, has launched an initiative called Climate Scanner with the support of experts and international organizations. At the same time, it's very important for us to participate in this event today together with SAI20 members, because we have close cooperation relations both at the national level and on a bilateral basis. Using the opportunity, we express our deep gratitude to the leadership of the Supreme Audit Institutions of Saudi Arabia, South Korea, the United Arab Emirates, the People's Republic of China, and Poland, with whom we cooperate on a bilateral level and based on signed memorandums on cooperation at the bilateral level. We hope that the participation of Supreme Audit Institutions in this event will contribute valuable perspectives and help to facilitate the discussions at the G20 level and build a bridge between SAI. At the same time, we would like to state that in the future, the formation of a more comprehensive exchanging experience program on climate action assessment by SAI and its relevant working group can serve to increase the capacity of personnel. Also, active organization of events such as the one we are currently participating will also help to achieve the goals ahead. Once again, thanks to Mr. Bruno Dantas, President of the Court of Accounts of Federative Republic of Brazil and Chairman of the SAI organization, and all his staff, and we hope that the disclosure of the results of the climate scanner assessment at the 29th Conference of the Parties to the Convention Framework COP29 will contribute to the strengthening of actions related to climate actions, as well as the activities of Supreme Audit Institutions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Bruno Dantas.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nazir Sadgov. I now invite to take the floor the Chair of SAI Ecuador, Controller General Mauricio Torres.
Distinguido presidente, honorables delegados, estimados colegas. Es un honor para mí dirigirme a ustedes en esta reunión de la SAI20 2024, donde nos congregamos
Agora chegou. Not only as a representative, but also as guarantee for the nations in the future. Today, in our statement of SAI20 2024, we have an agenda to the collaborative debate that reflects our commitment with a sustainable future and equal. The sense of our mission in this summit is superior entities. This is a link that through the SAI20 group converts in a channel to promote the unity and a shared proposal with our global community. The importance of the topics that we are discussing here, as like climate, financing, and energy transition, and the fight against poverty and hunger, cannot underestimate the challenges. These challenges are interconnected and are paramount to the well-being of future generations. We are in a maze where the collective experience and the resources of our community has the power to foster and bring significant change. I believe that the meaning of SAI20 2024 will reinforce our common goals and also will bring concrete actions and effective actions in our respective nations. The fight against hunger and poverty will constitute a phenomenal fight, and our SAIs has a vital role to assure that the resources dedicated to these causes will be efficient. We are sure that our collective efforts will leave a lasting impact in the global community and will influence directly in international mode. We think firmly that through collaboration and exchange of knowledge, we can promote significant change to our respective nations. And finally, allow me to say that to thank you from the Ecuador to allow us to participate and make part of the debate every time we bring our commitment and support to bring in this mission together.
Muchas gracias, Señor Mauricio Torres. Thank you so much. I now pass the floor to Mr. Amadou Baldé, the President of the Supreme Audit Institution of Guiné-Bissau.
Muito obrigado. Minhas saudações e cumprimentos aos presidentes das instituições superiores de controlo,
Greetings to the President of the Supreme Institution of Control of SAI20 and other institutions and guests, in particular from the SAI and people from the Portuguese language countries. I'd like to thank my dear friend, President Bruno Dantas, President of SAI, SAI20, for his invitation to participate in this third edition of the Summit of SAI20, representing not only the SAIs from Guinea-Bissau, but all the institution of control of the country members of the CPP. I'd like to highlight that your honorable presence here in this important event is more in the way of reinforcing the commitment of the Court of Accounts of Guinea-Bissau and our organization, and to reinforce and to amplify the voice of the Federal Accounting Court in a global scenario that's ever more global, namely to, in particular, to face the challenges of climate changes and eradication of hunger and poverty and energy transition, the increasing of extreme weather events such as recently the impact in Rio Grande do Sul, for example, they need the attention action, the proactive action of the superior institution of control from all over the world. From Guinea-Bissau and from the institutions of the countries of the Portuguese language. In this sense, in the level of our organization, we launched and presented in the past January the results of an audit coordinated, the areas protected, carried out in a way that integral and transversal with the participation of 6 Court of Accounts of the countries that speak Portuguese, and with the coordination of the Court of Accounts of the Brazil, this to demonstrate our effort, our commitment regarding the fighting the climate changes. When the statistical data, the Organization of the United Nations, FAO, showed that over 735 million people are going hungry in the world. We, the control institution, cannot be indifferent. We need to have actions, new actions, coordinated or national oriented to fight those challenges that affect us all. That's why I believe that from the exchange of serious ideas and fruitful ideas about global issues relevant or urgent regarding fighting hunger, poverty, climate financing and energy transition that's fair and inclusive, that they adopt the joint declaration with recommendation to the G20 leaders to boost the development of public policies for the improvement of the quality of life all over the world, leaving no one behind. And the Court of Accounts of Guinea-Bissau, our organization, which is the organizations of control of the communities of the Portuguese-speaking countries, will participate in this effort. It's collective. It's internally together with national actions, or in a way, a coordinated way through actions, through coordinated actions. That's why we ask the member countries of this summit to adopt the recommendations that will come out of this great encounter. It's a great meeting. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, Amadou.
Thank you,
Thank
Amadou.
very much, Mr. Amadou Baldé.
Muito obrigado, Amadou
Now,
Baldé.
I
Agora
pass the floor
eu passo a palavra
to SAI Maldives, Mr. Hussein Niazi. Please, the floor is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. Distinguished colleagues, on behalf of the Inter-SAI Working Group on Environmental Audit, we appreciate the SAI20 for inviting us and be represented in this significant forum. As the Vice Chair of WGA, I would like to start by congratulating SAI Brazil on the wonderful efforts made to make this in-person meeting a reality. Indeed, SAIs working together in collaboration is a key characteristic of the inter-SAI, and especially when we have the collective collaboration on enhancing accountability of the strongest economies. It will have the trickle-down effect that transcends the national bounds and even the bounds of SAI20 itself. Ladies and gentlemen, the countries that are represented here play a critical role in the global environmental stewardship. The SAIs within these economies continue to carry out their duties to ensure the development of the nations are running its course on sustainability, and that the public funds are allocated for environmental preservation are utilized efficiently and effectively. It is with great pleasure and appreciation that I note that all these SAIs not only do their part in national accountability, but are pillars in the inter-SAI, which facilitates the development of the rest of the community. We at the inter-SAI WGA have been working in close collaboration with the SAIs in the SAI20. I would like to note the WGA work plans is formulated on the most critical issues faced by the globe today. Some of the most significant endeavors of the WGA include the Climate Scanner project led by the chair of SAI Brazil, the Climate and Biodiversity Nexus project led by SAI Canada, the work package on environmental accounting led by the SAI of UK, the work package on green fiscal policy tools jointly led by the European Court of Auditors and SAI USA, and also the sustainability reporting project jointly led by SAI of Thailand and SAI of Indonesia. Through these efforts, the WGA foresees the capabilities of SAIs would be strengthened, leading to enhanced national environmental accountability. Myself, from SAI Maldives, being from a small island developing state, we particularly note that the efforts of the Climate Scanner is a promising project which will help the small island developing states through these difficult times of climate change. Climate finance remains a key area of focus of the inter-SAI WGA. As such, the project implemented on 2022 noted many areas of improvement, such as absence of national targets, the lack of internationally agreed definitions, and the need for audits on the effectiveness on the climate finance. The working group of WGA remains committed to bring transformational change in the field of environmental accountability, and this is made possible by the collective efforts of all our members. I look forward to the fruitful discussions in this summit and wish everyone a successful engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hussein Yazi. And I now pass the floor to SAI São Tomé and Príncipe, Mr. Ricardino Costa Alegre. The floor is yours.
Obrigado, Ministro Dantas, distintos colegas. SAI de São Tomé e Príncipe saúda e agradece o TCU pelo acolhimento desta.
The Federal Court of Accounts for this invitation for this important event, and the other representatives of the other SAIs. This event, everybody has the opportunity to strengthen the friendship and cooperation, highlighting the importance of our institution in the concretization of the agenda, in our strong conviction of engagement with global challenges. Thank you for the invitation, Minister Dantas.
Muito Obrigado.
Thank you.
Presidente Ricardino Costa
Presidente
Alegre, thank you so
Ricardino
much.
Costa Alegre,
President Ricardino
Muito
Costa
obrigado,
Alegre,
Ricardino
dear
Costa Alegre,
colleagues,
colegas.
Together,
Juntos.
Brazil and the countries represented here are glad to have heard the inspiring words of 20 countries, and we will stop for a 15-minute break and be back for our insightful panel discussions. The objective of today's panel discussions is to hear from specialists and civil society representatives integrating their views into our SAI20 work plan for the second semester. We hope you find the discussions enriching and engaging. So now we give a break for a coffee. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming back. We will now begin our panel discussions. The objective of today's panel discussions is to hear from specialists and civil society representatives, integrating their views into our SAI20 work plan. To moderate this session, I will invite Mr. Osvaldo Rudloff. Osvaldo is from Chile, and he has developed his career working with Supreme Audit Institutions. Since 2021, he has worked as a consultant supporting the implementation of various projects related to public control systems in Latin America. So I will, without further ado, hand over to Osvaldo, please.
Thank you, Raisa. Welcome to today's panel discussion sessions. We would like to express our gratitude to all the authorities, speakers, and panelists here who generously shared their experience and insights during these technical panels. Their contribution, we are sure, will be incredibly valuable and will enhance this event. We are honored to have you all joining us for this important event, where we will explore two pivotal themes in our global pursuit of sustainability and equity. On the one hand, during panel one, we will discuss strategies and challenges for climate finance and just and inclusive energy transition, which will address the financial mechanism and strategic approaches necessary to support a sustainable energy transition that is both equitable and inclusive. During panel two, we will focus on multidimensional poverty in the context of climate change, in which we will delve into the complex relationship between poverty and climate change. Each panel will commence with a keynote speaker here, who will set the stage, followed by the presentation from our esteemed guest panelists. And after these presentations, a specialist speaker will offer a wrap-up, providing further insights and trying together the key points discussed. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start our first panel, Strategies and Challenges for Climate Finance and Just and Inclusive Energy Transitions. This panel addresses a crucial aspect of our global sustainable efforts: how to finance the transition to a sustainable energy future, equitable and inclusively. This transition must be fair, ensuring that vulnerable populations are not left behind, but are active participants and beneficiaries of these changes. In this given context, Supreme Audit Institutions, SAIs, play a crucial role in auditing climate finance and energy transition strategies, ensuring public funds transparency, accountability, and effectiveness. Their oversight of SAIs is instrumental in fostering trust and ensuring efficient use of financial resources to achieve desired outcomes. And to open the floor, I would like to welcome Ms. Thelma Crook, Chair of the Board of Directors for the Global Observing System for Climate under the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. Ms. Crook is a retired senior researcher at the National Institute for Space Research in Brazil, INPE. She's a mathematician with a PhD in spatial statistics from the University of Sheffield in England. She was a member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC board, from 2002 to 2015, and its vice president from 2015 until July 2023. So for more than 15 years, she represented Brazil in international negotiations at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change on topics related to land use and land use change, forest, national greenhouse gas inventories, research and systematic observation, among others. Since August 2023, she has chaired the board of directors of the Global Observing System for Climate under the World Meteorological Organization. During her presentation, Ms. Crook will highlight recent advances in climate science and the urgency of meeting Paris Agreement goals. She will discuss financing strategies for energy transition projects, emphasizing resource allocation for social equity and environmental justice, and explore auditing challenges and opportunities related to policies and sustainability. Ms. Crook, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all participants and authorities, our panelists here. And at the onset, let me thank the Federal Court of Accounts for the invitation to deliver this keynote speech on climate finance and just and inclusive energy transition. In this brief presentation, I will focus on messages from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC scientific reports, particularly those in the 2022 mitigation report. Well, I will start my presentation with two questions that I seek to address after I introduce some few scientific findings from the IPCC reports. The questions are, why do we need a just and inclusive energy transition? And what is the role of climate finance? The assessment of the IPCC physical science basis indicates sustained and widespread changes in the atmosphere, in the cryosphere, biosphere, and ocean, providing unequivocal evidence of a world that has warmed, associated with rising atmospheric CO2 concentrations, reaching levels not experienced in at least the last 2 billion years. Aside from temperature, other clearly discernible human-induced changes beyond climate variability, natural variability, are also observed, such as heavy precipitation and droughts. In 2019, the increase in the global mean temperature above pre-industrial levels reached around 1.1 degrees Celsius, associated mainly with anthropogenic sources of greenhouse gases. Although science has been warning for a long time about the impacts and risks to human and natural systems from a warming climate, actions to prevent global warming have been largely insufficient. In view of more updated scientific results from the IPCC in 2014, the Climate Change Convention decided on a more ambitious and inclusive climate agreement. The Paris Agreement, with near universal participation, set a long-term temperature goal of holding the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 above these levels. The agreement is grounded on encouraging progressive, ambitious climate action from all countries on the basis of their nationally determined contributions, NDCs, which sets the level of ambition of climate change mitigation towards the agreed Paris goals. Following the Paris decision, the Climate Change Convention invited the IPCC to provide a special report in 2018 on the impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and related global greenhouse gas emission pathways. As part of this special report, the IPCC assessed global emission pathways to meet Paris temperature goals based on existing literature. One of the important findings from this assessment was that to limit global warming to 1.5 at the end of this century, the global CO2 emissions would have to reach net zero around 2050. I said globally. And for 2 degrees, around 2070. But the impacts of these 0.5 degrees Celsius on human and natural systems would be much higher, and some even irreversible. In parallel to the reduction of CO2 emissions, ambitious reductions in the emissions of other greenhouse gases, such as methane and nitrous oxide, would also be needed globally. different portfolios of mitigation measures and strategies could lead to the net emission reductions required to limit warming to 1.5, but rapid and far-reaching transitions in energy, land, urban and infrastructure, and industrial systems would be needed to achieve a low-carbon economy. Transitions are complex and involve governance structures, institutions, and climate vulnerabilities, and need to include historical responsibility, resource intensity, and capacity differentials. Transition processes will have to respond to several preconditions and structural inequalities related to climate finance, energy poverty, vulnerabilities, and the broader macroeconomic implications. Phasing out fossil fuels from energy systems, which is recognized in the reports of the IPCC to be technically possible and at a relatively low cost, is required to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. However, it's still largely constrained by existing fossil fuel-based infrastructure and the existence of stranded investments. It is widely recognized that governments cannot single-handedly fund the transition, least of all in low-income developing countries with large sovereign debt and poor access to global financial markets. Long-term sources of private capital are required to close the financing gap across sectors and geographies. Future investment needs are greatest in emerging and developing economies, which already face higher costs of capital, hindering capacity to finance a transition. The focus of global climate finance has been mainly on mitigation. In the period from 2017 to 2020, it was more than 90%. However, climate finance for adaptation is increasing as a better understanding of the significant effects of physical impacts and their effect on financial stability. IPCC indicates that to meet the needs for rapid deployment of mitigation options, global mitigation investments need to increase by a factor of 3 to 6, and for least developed countries by a factor of 4 to 7. Developing countries make up 2/3 of the world's population and carry carbon-intensive economies where 70% of investments need to be conducted to limit warming to 2 degrees Celsius. The focus for climate investment has been on China, USA, Europe, India, and the G20. But studies highlight that Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals attention should be devoted to Africa, to the least developed countries, and to the small island development states, which contribute very little to global emissions and whose special needs and vulnerabilities are recognized under the Climate Change Convention and the UN agreements. There is high confidence in the assessment of the IPCC that climate finance in support of a just transition is likely to be a key to a successful low-carbon transition globally. The IPCC indicates that the just transition concept is still evolving and emphasizes its key principles of respect and dignity for vulnerable groups, the creation of decent jobs, social protection, employment rights, fairness in energy access and use, social dialogue, and democratic consultation with relevant stakeholders. The need to focus on the quality of the transition, not simply on its speed, is also emphasized and scholars are increasingly of the view that a transition involving low-carbon development should not replace old forms of injustice with new ones. Equality and justice are central dimensions of transitions in the context of sustainable development. Viewing climate change through the lens of justice requires a focus on the protection of vulnerable populations from the impacts of climate change, addressing the unequal distribution of the costs and consequences of the transitions themselves, including for those whose livelihoods are rooted in fossil fuel-based sectors and developing more creative and participatory processes for envisioning an equitable, decarbonized world. Neglecting issues of justice will have implications in the pace, scale, and quality of the transition. The Paris Agreement finance goal aims to make finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate-resilient development. In this regard, the Green Climate Fund, an operating entity of the UNFCCC financial mechanism to finance mitigation and adaptation efforts in developing countries, was given an important role in serving the agreement and supporting the Paris Agreement goals. The Green Climate Fund can offer and combine a full range of financing instruments, including loans, equity, guarantees, and grants to design solutions that address specific investment barriers. In 2022, the board approved nearly $1.43 billion in funding for new climate projects. And by 2023, the portfolio was expected to reach $13.5 billion. The Green Climate Fund mobilizes the private sector engagement and finances through its private sector facility. However, the Green Climate Fund still receives criticisms for the way it operates and in the delay to disburse the much-needed money for communities dealing with the impacts of climate change. So now coming back to my initial questions, why need a just and inclusive energy transition? And what's the role of climate finance? Well, I hope that the elements I have provided so far make it clear the need to have a rapid transition to a renewable energy system if the goal is to limit warming to levels that minimize or avoid the impacts and future risks of climate change. This rapid transition needs to be just and inclusive, as we say, where no one is left behind and voices are heard, if the aim is to ensure social acceptance of the profound changes the energy transition entails and to meet just and equity demands. The rapid transition to a low-carbon economy, including through the energy transition, is challenging to governments, as they need to ensure that decent jobs are available when the fossil fuel-based industries are phased out. Not only ensuring decent jobs and protecting workers, but also ensuring a social dialogue with engagement of workers and local communities and ensuring respect for human and labor rights across value chains. To achieve a just transition, adequate finance, including through increased international cooperation, is essential. Funding is not only needed to cover investments in energy transition related technologies and policies, but also in training and education, support for the development of local industries, and ensuring the adequate infrastructure required to promote a just transition. Proactive planning is required so that finance is allocated to deliver the results most beneficial to society. While with the right measures in place, the energy transition presents an unprecedented opportunity to render our energy systems more sustainable, equitable, and inclusive. just come into perspectives and challenges for SAI performance. The chapeau of the Paris Agreement acknowledges the imperatives of a just transition of the workforce and the creation of decent work and quality jobs in accordance with nationally defined development priorities. And it also affirms the importance of education, training, public awareness, public participation, public access to information, in cooperation at all levels on the matters addressed by that agreement. And in this regard, in my view, it indirectly recognizes the important role of Supreme Audit Institutions in assessing and disseminating information on policies and in the performance of public organizations, empowering them to call on public engagement to help increase the efficiency of governance, enhance transparency, and securing accountability of the public sector, ensuring an inclusive and democratic governance process. Countries have their own legislations and national capabilities that may impair their ability to adhere to international standards. Not all countries have experienced and qualified financial audit supervisors and technical experts. And it's sometimes unavoidable that SAI staff seek opportunities in more developed countries, thus requiring continuous training to ensure SAI's supervisory role. Presently, the most pressing need for SAI, in my view, is on tracking the progress in the implementation of the country's nationally determined contributions, which are updated every 5 years. Difficulties arise when countries do not provide clear and transparent indicators for the mitigation activities included in their NDCs. When there is no clear indication of the costs associated with the implementation of the mitigation and adaptation activities, and in many cases, to increase the resilience to climate change. Or when the country identifies barriers for the implementation of its NDC, including finance, capacity building, and technology transfer barriers, but is not able to identify the specific needs to overcome these needs or these barriers. Or when the country places conditions, partially or totally, to the implementation of its NDC to international cooperation, but does not provide transparent information on how the financial means allocated by bilateral partners, for instance, will be applied. This constitutes a great challenge for SAIs, but also a great opportunity to engage with the civil society and develop strong relationships with the legislative committees. So, as we see, there are many challenges to be overcome to ensure consistency with the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement. At this stage, it would be instrumental to ensure an independent evaluation of the global efforts to tackle climate change, including issues of governance, public policies, and financing, and in producing reliable, independent, and transparent indicators for the evaluation of the national climate-related policies. And in this regard, the Climate Scanner, an initiative of the Federal Court of Accounts as chair of the SAI, might help achieve these objectives and lead the way for a better understanding of the constraints and opportunities faced by developed and developing countries. And so with this, I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and I hope this can be helpful for the discussions to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kruk, for your interesting insights. And to continue on this panel one, I would like to introduce His Excellency, Councillor Hesham Badawi. He's the chairman of the Egyptian Supreme Audit Institution and Intosai first president. After graduating from the Faculty of Law at Cairo University in 1980, Councillor Badawi began working in the judiciary as a public prosecution assistant. He was a judge at the Cairo Court of Appeals from 2012 to 2015 and held the position of Assistant Minister of Justice to Combat Corruption and was appointed Vice President of the Supreme Audit Authority in December 2015. He was appointed First Attorney General for Supreme State Security Prosecutions from the year 2000 until 2012. And Consular Badawi also assumed the position of head of the Supreme Audit in the Arab Republic of Egypt in 2016 for 4 years. And in 2020, the appointment was renewed for 4 more years. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
السيدات والسادة الحضور، في إطار تحديات تمويل المناخ وتحولات الطاقة والاستراتيجيات ذات الصلة، أعتقد أن التحدي الأخطر على الإطلاق هو تداعيات التغير المناخي خاصة في البلدان النامية. تأتي هذه التداعيات في ظل سياق دولي وإقليمي متغير ومتشابك.
The strategies that are relevant and challenges have repercussion of the climate changes, especially in the developing countries. But those countries have more changes, social changes. I'm very happy for being here with you today in this dialogue to face the climate changes and energy transition that is very important. The use of the natural resources or the sustainable development.
Considering that the climate finance refers to maximization of the resources to the measurement that target specifically to do of the climate change during the 15th conference in the United States held in 2009 in the developing countries to mobilize 100 million, and this way the institutions have a role to inspect the public money directed to the strategies and the policies to fight against the climate change. Besides, the controlling institutions help to decrease the impact of the climate change and the climate alterations. And through the supervision inspection, the public organizations and private organizations can change the assessment of the impact of these projects. According to the Paris Agreement on climate change, with the objective to reach a goal to keep the temperature below 1.05 degrees, many efforts were made to, like my country held the Conference of the States of the United States about climate change, COP27, that highlighted the seriousness of the problem and that the world is facing in terms of climate change. The conference was finished as an agreement to establish a damage fund, with the mechanisms to deal with, to help the developing countries in the just transition, the energy just transition, and through the local level and international level, the policies, the national policies. In connection with the audit of the SAI, that is an inspection, general inspection about all the projects, national projects that work in the energy, clean energy, on the clean energy, and to support all the projects that work with the clean energy, and besides protecting the resources, natural resources. This way, in development assessment, through 4 main stages. First, the primary arrangements that try to identify the practices, the present practices about policies, environmental policies, in its compatibility with activities that already exist, and the nature of the material that are used in the operational process, in the planning process, to the assessment process. After these stages, the objectives are defined, the methodology, the places, the place of work. In the third phase, the process of assessment of development is held through the assessment of efficiency of the audit and the guarantee of the accomplishment of the controlling approaches, as well as the operational tests, among others, together with the environmental policies of the state. The review of the goals, besides of the auditing, this side of Egypt holds financial auditing in its law, with like governmental expenses, especially in the funds of finance to environment. About this inspection of the behavioral and strategy, the finance audit represents the reports to the authorities and include outcomes of this audit to the Egyptian parliament. This way, we can say that the SAI Egypt adopts a controlling approach, integrated, based on orientation to the assessment and divulgation of transparency. Besides, it is integrated through some actions of the government and some national projects. In Tosca, for example, in May of 2024, this project has brought some results, such as one inside of the desert as a way of technology, and it helps to find a result, a great result in terms of agricultural resources. These are some of the general outcomes. About the international level, about international economy, about the project of Clean Scanner to use a methodology, a general methodology, to inspect the acts of the governments in general. This project, in general terms, the change in the use of the energy is very important, not to our project until 2030. According to what I said, the use of the government and other countries are very important to, and SAI has a very important role through the results and the delegations. First, to protect the policies as orientations through the second, to build the capacities, training, to improve the capacitation of people and some other people who work in the energy transition, cooperation through good practices about the work of the instances that work on climate change, and also in the control and inspection through cooperative initiatives about this scanner that is a very important project in the area of climate change. And this allows to assess the public policies and to go for energy transition, and we need to follow the progress in this area, in the climate works presented, to see in which way we can achieve our goals and what kind of finance we need for that. Fifth, we need to assure the transparency through the reports, complete reports about all the work which was developed through energy transition. Sixth, we need to strengthen the good practices in the governmental bodies and to strengthen the climate considerations in the decision-making process. And the size of all countries need to work together to a world without carbon. Seventh, a digital transition, digital solutions to face the challenge and to train people in this sense. And we can do of this point some work on all the instances, and to gather all these efforts so that this message can reach the message of a good governance. These ideas we want to exchange with you about climate finance, and renewable energy has as the objective to make a change, efficient change, and also it needs to be done cooperatively so that we can leave this present crisis. In general way, we are facing different challenges that require cooperation to reach our goals. We need climate financing with everyone's collaboration so that we can have a better future for our generation. And also the inspection and auditing instances have an essential role in their work according to the objectives and development, and also depending on the reality of each country. I would like to thank everyone who have been participating in the organization of this meeting, and also everyone who has made the efforts to help us to overcome the challenge. Thank you.
Councillor Badawi, thank you very much for your interesting presentation regarding SAI's contribution to these topics. And now, we will have the presentation from His Excellency Nasir Sadigov, who is the Deputy Chairman of the Chamber of Accounts of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Dr. Sadigov is an international law graduate, currently managing the organization of COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, on behalf of the Court of Accounts. Dr. Sadigov has a series of significant appointments in the public sector. He started as a Deputy Director of Legal Personal Issues and Internal Control Department in January 2015. In February 2020, he became Director of the Legal Support and Human Resources Department at the Chamber of Accounts. He was promoted to the head of the Chamber of Accounts apparatus the same year, and in 2021, he was appointed Deputy Chairman of the Chamber of Accounts of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Dr. Sadigov will present the Chamber of Accounts of Azerbaijan's experience overseeing public policies related to climate finance and energy transitions. And he also will share some information about organizing COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan in November this year. Dr. Sadigov, please.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I would like to start my speech by drawing your attention to the activities carried out on inclusive energy transitions in the Republic of Azerbaijan. However, adhering to the obligations arising from the international documents to which our country is a party, it's expanding its activities on reducing the effects of climate change and switching to green energy. Azerbaijan has set a policy goal of ensuring an energy transition by focusing on a broader diversification agenda and prioritizing renewable energy sources such as wind and solar. Despite being rich in energy resources and recognized as an exporter of energy resources in the world, one of the main goals of the energy security policy implemented in the Republic of Azerbaijan is to strengthen the use of renewable energy sources in our country. A modern legal framework has been formed in this direction. The issues of climate change and the fight against it, as well as the application of renewable energy based on the green energy space principles in all areas of the economy in our country, are reflected in our strategic documents. National priorities are also of particular importance in the direction of the implementation of the obligation arising from the United Nations Transformation of Our World Agenda for Sustainable Development until 2030. As a contribution to initiatives to mitigate the effects of a global climate change, Azerbaijan has set a goal of maintaining a 35% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 compared to the base year 1990. As the COP26 conference held in Glasgow in November 2021, our country accepted a new commitment to reduce emissions by 40% by 2050 and to create a net zero emission zone in the territories liberated from occupation as a voluntary commitment. In order to achieve these goals, the Ministry of Energy has set the main goal of increasing the share of renewable energy investment in the total energy balance of the country to 30% by 2030. You can see in these slides technical and economical potential and the installed capacity of Azerbaijan. Since 2020, cooperation on renewable energy projects with Mastar, ACWA Power, BP Fortescue Future Industries, China Gejuba Group Overseas Investment, Total Energy, Noble Energy, Aztec Engineering and Baltic has been started. On October 26, 2023, the largest solar power plant in the Caspian Sea and the Commonwealth of Independent Countries region, the 230 megawatt Garda solar power plant was commissioned in cooperation with the United Arab Emirates Master Company. The station is the first industrial-scale solar power station realized by attracting foreign investment in our country. 110 million cubic meters of natural gas will be saved by producing 500 million kilowatt-hour electricity annually at the station. At the same time, carbon emissions will be reduced by 200,000 tons. 570,000 solar panels have been installed in the power plant, covering an area of 550 hectares. At the same time, we would like to note that there are 3 investment agreements on green energy projects with a total capacity of 1,000 megawatts have been signed with Master. Also, the construction project of a 240 megawatt wind power plant is ongoing cooperation with the Saudi Arabian ACWA Power Company. In addition, Azerbaijan offshore wind roadmap was developed and a memorandum of understanding was signed with the International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group, and the implementation agreement on evaluation, development and the implementation of 1 gigawatt utility scale onshore solar and wind energy projects in the Republic of Azerbaijan, and implementation agreement on evaluation, development and implementation offshore 2 gigawatt integrated wind and green hydrogen were signed between the Ministry of Energy and United Arab Emirates company Mastar. On December 15, 2022, a framework agreement was signed with Australia's Fortescue Future Industries on joint cooperation on the study and development of renewable energy projects and potential of green hydrogen in Azerbaijan. On December 17, 2022, the agreement on strategic partnership in the field of development and transmission of green energy between the governments of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Georgia, Romania, and Hungary was signed in Bucharest. According to the agreement, green energy produced in the Caspian Sea will be exported to Europe. On May 2, 2024, the Memorandum of Cooperation on the Merging of Energy Systems was signed in Uzbekistan between the heads of relevant ministers of Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. In accordance with the implementation of the decree of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan on measures related to the creation of a green energy zone in the liberated territories of the Republic of Azerbaijan from occupation, and the action plan for the establishment of a green energy zone in the liberated territories of the Republic of Azerbaijan in 2022-2026 was approved. Currently, the action plan is being implemented. These above listed are part of the activities carried out by the Republic of Azerbaijan on green energy, and the activity itself is extensive. In the 2022-2026 Socio-Economic Development Strategy of the Republic of Azerbaijan, approved by the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, it's reflected that the share of renewable energy sources in the installed capacity of electricity production will be increased to 25% by 2026 and to 30% by 2030. Pollution of environment by vehicles that have become unusable and the end of service life is currently a serious problem all over the world. The implementation of vehicles disposal programs at the public level is important in terms of environmental protection. As part of state budget of the Republic of Azerbaijan, the Vehicle Disposal Fund has been established, and other necessary measures are being taken in this regard. At the same time, hybrid and electric cars imported into the country are exempted from customs taxes and duties. Dear colleagues, in the fight against climate change, which has become the main threat to humanity, the importance of Supreme Audit Institutions have an exceptional role in evaluating the measures implemented globally at the level of states and international organizations and the efficient, economical, and effective implementation of the required financial resources. Taking into account the use of significant international finance, including the use of public resources for the implementation of activities related to the minimization of the socio-economic effects and the negative consequences of climate cataclysms, SAIs that perform the function of controlling the management of public finances, contribute to this issue through their audits. For this reason, recently, international and national interest in the audits conducted by SAIs related to the assessment of environmental and direct climate activities has been increasing. Our country cooperates with the international organizations, donor agencies, and the neighboring countries to share knowledge, resources, and the best practices in climate management. An environmental audit in Azerbaijan involves a systematic assessment of the country's environmental activities, policies, and practices to assess compliance with environmental protection regulations, identify areas for improvement, and promote sustainable development. As a rapidly developing country with diverse ecosystems and industries, Azerbaijan recognizes the importance of regular environmental audits to ensure the protection of natural resources, biodiversity, and public health. An important legal framework has been formed in this direction. The Chamber of Accounts of the Republic of Azerbaijan, as the Supreme Audit Institution of the country, has conducted various audits in the direction of water and forest resources management, as well as on alternative and renewable energy activities in the direction of protecting the soil ecosystem, ensuring sustainable management and access to water and sanitation for all from the Sustainable Development Goals. And currently, our other audits are going in these areas. The results of 5 performance audits on SDGs are included in INTOSAI's SDG Atlas. It's gratifying that, as a result of our audits, various measures are being taken by the relevant government agencies based on the audit findings revealed as a result of our suggestions. And thanks to these positive results are already being achieved. Audit measures conducted by the Chamber of Accounts determines that all buildings within the Smart Village project of liberated territories from occupation were designed and built in a modern, resources-efficient manner that significantly reduces carbon footprints. In this direction, work is being continued in other areas. As we all know, climate change is closely related to budgetary, financial, and socio-economic issues. The main goal here is to bridge the gap between budget and climate policy in accordance with Article 2 of the Paris Agreement. It should be noted that our deep adoption of the Green Budget Framework of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development OECD and the Green Budget Reference Framework of the European Union and other instruments. Since climate change is a threat of our planet, especially according to the data shown in the World Bank report, due to the risk that effects of a changing climate could result in between 68 and 132 million people falling into poverty within 10 years. We need to think of such a mechanism that the audit will include a set of common national, regional, and global indicators and targets. In this regard, increasing efforts and knowledge transfer within INTOSAI and its regional organizations constitute one of the urgent activities. Climate Scanner project can act as a unique opportunity in this direction. We suggest to continue the activity in this framework and similar direction. It's expected that the results of Climate Scanner initiative, which has been implemented since 2022 with the support of international experts and organizations, will be presented to the world community at the COP29 to be held in Azerbaijan November of this year. In accordance with the purpose of this tool, to summarize the information on activities of the participating SAIs on climate action assessments at the national and international levels, in 3 directions on climate actions to provide relevant information to stakeholders. For this reason, we appeal to each of you freely share knowledge and skills on an open platform to consider the possibility of carrying out our mission to save our planet only together, and to support the activities carried out with our audits in various formats. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Sadigov, for telling us what Azerbaijan is doing in terms of energy transition and the contribution your SAI is doing in this regard. After 2 SAIs presentation, now we will have a presentation from Ms. Camila Camilo. She's a representative from the W20, Women 20 G20 Engagement Group. Ms. Camila Camilo is a Brazilian activist and social entrepreneur who builds bridges between big players such as Google, Alpargatas, Votorantim Group, and grassroots initiatives to develop open innovation, social responsibility, environmental and social governance strategies, and climate action projects. Ms. Camilo co-founded Creators Academy Brazil, an initiative that aims to develop innovative and strategic ways to communicate messages about climate action and democracy. She's a data-driven person, currently leading the Brazilian Social Impact Map, MICE, project, which gather information about over 800,000 NGOs to support social impact investors and decision makers in their impact strategies based on data. Ms. Camilo also collaborates with the Angels of the City, an association that seeks to address social issues like homelessness and addiction while championing climate initiatives. Ms. Camila Camilo's presentation will discuss climate change, inclusive energy transition, and gender equality. It will focus on the importance of providing women with access to resources and eliminating violence against them. Ms. Camilo will also underscore women's significant contribution to social and environmental impact and provide practical guidance for public initiatives to achieve sustainable development goals. Ms. Camilo, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. I grew up in an outskirts neighborhood in the east side of São Paulo City. I'm the second daughter of 4 children raised by a single mother. My story is quite similar to over 40% of the homes in Brazil, led by a woman because an absent partner. My professional life started when I was 11. And since then, work is where I feel safe. Being here today is something new for me, so I want to ask you for take it easy. Just my first time in a floor like this. My name is Camila Camilo. I am an activist and a social entrepreneur. I am also a delegate of the W20, the G20 engagement group focused on promoting gender equality and women's economic empowerment. The W20 Brazilian presidency chose 5 thematic areas: women entrepreneurship, women in STEM, care economy, ending violence against women, and climate justice. So my message to you is, imagine a world where everyone, regardless their gender, race, has the opportunity to thrive and contribute to a sustainable future. Today, I want to talk about the intersection of gender empowerment, just energy transition, and climate justice. These challenges are deeply interconnected, and addressing them together can lead us to a more fair, equitable, and sustainable world. To set the stage, consider this. 7 out of 10 Brazilians have experienced or know someone who experienced a climate extreme event. This statistic highlights the urgent need to comprehensive climate action that includes and equitable, inclusive and equitable. But what nobody is talking about is how those issues affected disproportionately women and children. And most importantly, how we, as a society, will make sure that the G20 countries will do more than ask for more data and more studies. Actually, we will choose action. Otherwise, we may make some shareholders happy, but there will be at the cost of millions of women's and children's lives. Women empowerment is about creating an environment where everyone can participate fully and equally in all aspects of life. This means access to education, economic opportunities, and leadership roles. When women and social minority groups are empowered, society becomes more resilient, productive, and innovative. For example, in my own experience working with traditional communities, I have seen firsthand how women leading agriculture or touristic activities or projects can significantly improve productivity and community well-being. According to the McKinsey Global Institute's report, eliminating all gender inequalities could add $28 trillion to the global GDP. But we lost this opportunity already because the time was till 2025. But I trust you. I trust you can at least make for that. A just energy transition involves moving towards sustainable energy sources in a way that is fair and inclusive, and we all know that. This means ensuring the benefits of the transition, such as job creation and improved health, are accessible to all, regarding their gender, especially those who have been historically marginalized or underserved. What brings my question to all of you? How do we measure the just part of the energy transition in your and my country? What are the KPIs? Can we prove it? Can we all agree that we don't have more time to leave half of the world's population behind? True climate justice can only be achieved when all women have access to fundamental resources, such as land, basic sanitation, and drinking water. These rights are essential for female social justice and prerequisite for meaningful climate justice discussions. For instance, the UN Women reports that women make up for 43% of the agricultural labor force in developing countries, but own just less than 20% of the land. Here in Brazil, we have an exquisite example that makes all the difference. Our national social housing program, Minha Casa Minha Vida, makes sure that the property goes in name of the women, which promotes women autonomy. Can we do that for land and rural areas? If you ensure the land rights for women, which can significantly boost agriculture output and sustainability, that would be awesome. Climate justice recognizes that climate change disproportionately affects marginalized communities. These communities often have the least resources to adapt to changing conditions and most impacted by environmental degradation, despite being those who contribute less to climate crisis, state as we know. In my work with indigenous communities, I have seen how supporting women access to resources can lead to the preservation of vital ecosystems and traditional knowledge that contributes to climate resilience. And also how powerful it is when women and children have access to technology and they master not just the use of the technology, but the development of the technologies. For the past 6 months, alongside the AI researcher David Dow, I've been working on training indigenous communities to use AI as a tool, not just for safeguarding their knowledges, but to support biodiversity monitoring and conservation. So far, the results are tremendous. We hire one of the girls of the community that now are more than just using AI. They are training others to pilot drones, install, monitor audio morphs, and analyze the data using AI. Technology can be an equalizer for social inequalities. And we can leverage technology for everyone. Research from the Global Gender and Climate Alliance shows that women are more likely to adopt sustainable practices and renewable energy sources. Their involvement in community project leads to better environment outcomes and long-term behavioral changes. Eradicating violence against women is crucial. It's not only addressing a critical social injustice, but also empower women to participate actively in the climate action and policy making. Where injustice is present in women's lives at a risk, and it is our duty to make sure that our governments will take action. According to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women worldwide has experienced physical violence. And this scenario can get worse in cases of climate disasters, when women are not part of the leadership task forces of first response activities. Take the Rio Grande do Sul example, when women and girls were harassed and abused in the shelters because there was no gender perspective in the managing crisis. I can guarantee you that a woman would think about exclusive shelters or actions to prevent it. I know that by addressing this issue, we can unlock the potential of millions of women that will be safe and available to contribute with climate action. Well, I truly believe that we can really change the world one conversation at a time. That's why I'm here today. I am honored to share with you the W20 Climate Justice Working Group recommendations with all of you. Because I believe if we echo these points, we'll save so many lives. And if nothing that I said until now got to you, please pay attention to these 5 points. To ensure gender-responsive climate action, our countries must guarantee a gender-responsive approach in our climate policies, which means include gender perspectives in our NDCs. Invest in gender-just climate finance and implement directly fund to women-led climate projects. Integrate a gender lens into disaster risk reduction management. Address climate migration within international human rights law. Ensure spending money towards net zero goals are bold, fair, and include direct benefits to women and girls. Ensure transformative and gender-just transition by facilitating access to job, upskilling, and reskilling in the green and blue economies. These recommendations are crucial, especially considering the disproportionate socio-economic impacts of climate change on underserved women and girls. Intersectionality is a framework that helps us understand how various forms of inequality and discrimination overlap. Gender, race, economic status, and other identities intersect to create a unique experience, disadvantage, or privilege. By addressing these intersecting issues and giving women their due space of power and voice in society, we can regenerate the earth and preserve lives. I want to share with you a quick video that shows my message. The subtitles are in English. I don't know where is my video.
A Creators Academy é convite para retornar à natureza. A gente é a natureza. Escutar as vozes da floresta, das pessoas que são guardiãs da floresta.
Eu, como cacique, tenho preocupação, quero cuidar para que as pessoas tomem consciência da importância que nós temos de conviver com essa floresta, com essa natureza e brigar sempre pela proteção dela.
Estar aqui nesse espaço foi está sendo, né, muito bom, essa conexão com a natureza, com a ancestralidade.
A missão é aproximar os mundos, olhar para o outro, reconhecer o outro na diferença.
Eu peço a Deus, é o que eu tenho mais feito aqui, sabe? Para que eu possa ser um instrumento, uma ferramenta de envio de uma mensagem que é necessária e que é urgente.
Não existe outra forma de lutar contra a crise climática se não for entendendo mesmo que a gente está em um só planeta.
Igual isso aqui. E a gente tem a obrigação de preservar esse lugar, de cuidar desse lugar, de respeitar esse lugar.
E se questionar, qual que é meu papel no meio disso tudo? O que eu posso fazer?
É inserir aos poucos isso na minha vida e automaticamente vai ser inserido nos meus conteúdos.
Um start muito importante para virar uma chavinha na cabeça das pessoas, não dos seus seguidores que vocês vão começar agora a falar disso e eles vão virar essa chavinha, mas de nós mesmos, sabe?
Respirar fundo e reconhecer que, antes de tudo, eu também sou parte do problema, mas que eu também posso ser parte da solução.
Essa viagem me fez sair da bolha, ouvir mais e falar menos.
Valorizar as raízes. É um afro presente nem futuro, sem a floresta, mas também sem os povos da floresta.
Eu sou muito grata por estar aqui, assim, e que vou poder puxar ainda mais essa pauta, esse rolê.
A pergunta que fica diante disso tudo é: onde você quer estar? Do lado de quem que eu quero estar? As a Supreme Audit Institutions, what are your side? What are you gonna do to make sure that everyone has a fair space in this planet? I want to invite you to reflect on that and make sure that all women and girls will have an opportunity in our countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Camila, for your presentation and this beautiful and inspirational video. And now we will have a brief presentation from SAI Indonesia. So in this context, I would like to introduce Her Excellency Isma Yatun. She is the chairperson of the Audit Board of the Republic of Indonesia. Ms. Yatun, please.
Thank you, the moderator, honorable speakers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to the esteemed speakers for the insightful sharing. I am confident that this forum will significantly enhance our role in supporting the G20 government in addressing climate change. I am pleased to share our experience related to energy transition. In Indonesia, energy consumption accounts for 56% of total greenhouse gas emissions, or GHG. Our nation is committed to reducing greenhouse emissions by up to 41% by 2030. Over the past 5 years, we have conducted 6 audits to evaluate the effectiveness of policies, regulations, and investment in promoting the transition to renewable energy sources and reducing reliance on fossil fuels. These audits focus on policy coherence, cross-sectoral coordination, data reliability, research and technological innovation, and more importantly, the financial aspect. Our audits have also highlighted the importance of stimulating investment in renewable infrastructure, streamlining permitting processes for renewable projects, and implementing policies promoting the adoption of clean energy technologies. The audit demonstrated efforts that have significantly increased renewable energy supply across our nation, significantly reducing GHG emissions as well as our reliance to fossil fuel. By addressing these points, we can strengthen our policies, enhance cooperation, and drive impactful action. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And to close this first panel, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Philip Hauser, our specialist speaker, who is the chairman of the Brazilian Deliberative Council of the Institute E+ Energy Transition and director of business development at Solar Group in France. The E+ Energy Transition Institute, chaired by Mr. Hauser, is a think tank that promotes specifically proven and economically efficient climate change policies for Brazil. Mr. Hauser holds a master's degree in chemistry and business administration, specializing in environmental finance. With more than 20 years of experience developing climate change projects and policies, Mr. Hauser has worked with private sector companies such as Ecosecurities and Engie to promote investments in renewable energy, clean industry, and sustainable forestry. In his former role as program lead for the Agora industry, Mr. Hauser developed regulatory solutions to advance the climate neutrality of heavy industries such as steel and chemicals. Mr. Hauser worked with the French Solar Group to explore strategies for innovative carbon management to achieve climate neutrality in industries that rely on carbon and carbon-based feedstock, focusing on steel, ferroalloys, and silicon production. Mr. Hauser will conclude our panel discussing with an address that offers a forward-looking perspective and suggests future directions and implications related to the primary takeaways from our discussion. Mr. Hauser, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I don't say good evening because in Brazil we only say good evening after dinner. There's still some time to take until then. Welcome to you all to Belém. I think Belém is a fantastic place, and I thank Camila for showing us a bit how it is outside of this room. But I think it's very important that we are all here. I'm absolutely happy to see how so many countries, how the auditing institutions of all these countries come together to discuss how they can coordinate and work for better policies on the level of your countries, but also on the global level. I'm happy to be here with you and to discuss it. I thank Ministro Bruno Dantas and his team for making it so easy and so pleasurable to be here with you. And I also thank the E+ team, the NGO that we have here in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, in supporting me in preparing this contribution. So it's an honor to summarize and potentially comment on what has been discussed here in the panel. It's a challenge because obviously the institutions that you represent have a completely different approach to these things than a think tank or than academics or than an NGO. But I think this is a very important dialogue that we have to have, and I hope this is just the first one of many. So I would like to commence my speech with something that I found out about Aristoteles. He said 2,300 years ago that whenever a public office manages public funds, you need to have an office to audit and fiscalize. So he is a bit the father of the work that you are doing today. But Aristoteles said something else that I think is very interesting. He said, money is just a tool to facilitate transactions. It can attribute and compare the value of goods, but it does not have a value in itself. Intrinsic value are the goods that we need as humans to satisfy our necessities. And therefore money is only a tool to make our economy work. And I think these ideas are very instrumental when we discuss today the evolving role of Supreme Audit Institutions. You are all used to fiscalize public accounts if the money was spent correctly and hopefully well spent. But what if we think about our monetary system just as a tool to supply us with the basic necessities that we have as humans today and tomorrow? What if your role would be to manage or to audit and fiscalize that our economic system effectively helps us to deliver the necessities of societies today and tomorrow? I think if we would consider that as an objective, we would come to the conclusion that we are not on a good path. We have heard on our panel that climate change has emerged as the major challenge for mankind. It's a make or break situation for human cooperation. So it is really time to unite and to think about how we can restructure our economy to safeguard the environmental goods and services that we need today and for the future, while also making sure that we have an inclusive economy that delivers for everybody. Now, it's a somber objective, but I have good news. A climate-neutral economy is not only possible, it's a better economy in terms of welfare, equity, and prosperity. Why? First, we know that renewable energies and sustainable technologies are financially and certainly economically more attractive. Renewable energies, batteries, electric vehicles, heat pump, if not already cheaper, they will be cheaper shortly. And that is a big promise. Second, we know that renewable resources, a sustainable economy, is by nature more democratic and inclusive. Renewable energy, agriculture, forests are all distributed resources available in all countries, in all regions, different from the concentration of fossil fuel resources that we rely on today. As a result, developing these renewable resources requires to work with communities. It requires to share wealth to ensure their support. This is an advantage. It is an opportunity, but it also implies disadvantages for investors. Why are investors reluctant to finance our transition to climate neutrality? First, and in very simple terms, they prefer a fenced oil well compared to wind, solar, or hydropower plant with large surface areas and complex local communities. Especially complicated are communities with low socioeconomic development in regions with a weak state, because then investors have to deal with all the problems that are hard to manage and that imply hefty costs. Second, and that's not a surprise, investors prefer to continue using their legacy business and to play with proven business models. They see the future always from the perspective of their present position and are thus very path dependent. The lens for their future is always from the asset base that they own today. Finally, circular and resource-efficient business models are often more complex and not as easy to monetize as incumbent industries. Linear exploration, production, selling, and then waste depositing is a very easy business model. New circular business models are much more difficult to develop and to monetize. In summary, if we want to reap the socioeconomic benefits of this new economy that we want to develop, we need to convince investors to engage in creative destructions. They have to substitute the asset base they own today to build a new future for us all. And these deep metamorphoses of our economy must be driven by smart policy. And here I want to highlight something that Nazir Sagidov has shown for Azerbaijan in attracting investors. Listening to him, I had the impression that his strategy is to attract climate investment rather than discussing climate finance. So be open for business when it is aligned with your sustainable development objectives, when it is aligned with the conservation of your environmental assets, and when it is aligned with social inclusion and equity. So what can we learn from him and what can we learn from general practice on climate policy? We need all kinds of policies, command and control, carbon taxes, subsidies, cap and trade. All these must be used and combined in a smart and effective way. We also need to build social acceptance. We need to make sure that these projects are developed in a way that local communities benefit. If they don't benefit, they won't allow it. It's not a nice to have. It's a necessary element of a successful energy transition that local communities are part of it. Hashem, by the way, explained how Egypt audits and accompanies such projects, potentially to make sure that these projects do not only respect local environmental resources, but also social objectives. However, this whole thing is difficult for politicians. First, these policies are complex, and good politicians are often not the best technocrats. Also, even if this all makes sense for societies as a whole will win, there will always be losers, and these losers want to obstruct the process or demand compensation. So we need a process to deal with trade-offs. Finally, politicians are driven by short-term incentives of the next election cycles, and future generations do not have a vote. So what are the solutions? To effectively deal with climate change and with equity, we need an intergenerational time horizon for planning. The fact that all these countries now have NDCs with binding targets for climate neutrality is a firm reference for judging short-term policies and progress, as Dr. Thelma Krug has explained. Another reference is a recent decision of the German Constitutional Court that current climate policies must be equitable towards future generations. It is not constitutional to procrastinate climate action in Germany. Current generations have to do the same what we expect from future generations. Another interesting reference is a recent decision of the European Court of Human Rights. It decided that the right of elderly Swiss women were affected by increasing heat waves, and thus demanded that the Swiss government takes more serious action on greenhouse gas mitigation measures. And while these legal decisions are very encouraging, I don't think that the judiciary alone will be capable to audit and accompany us on our way to climate neutrality. So I'm convinced that there's an important role for Supreme Audit Institutions to first ensure that long-term state policies and commitments are kept and not ignored due to short-term priorities. Second, to accompany and audit climate policies to ensure their effectiveness, efficiency, and distributional justice, as well as the transparency under the NDC commitments, is a very important fundament for progress. Third, we need to accelerate institutional learning to ensure the constant improvement and the exchange that we need to get our policies right. Environmental policies are still relatively new. We will do a lot of mistakes, which is not a problem as long as we learn from it, but we need institutions that are capable for this learning. And finally, we need to provide an unbiased and transparent account to society. It is not enough for climate policies to be efficient and fair. They must appear to be efficient and fair. Only if the perception is positive, our societies will support this transformation. However, I can tell you that you're not alone. As this panel shows, you have civil society and academia at your side to support and resonate your work. We're looking forward to cooperating with you. And therefore, I commend the InterSAI, the SAI engagement group, and each individual institution for the engagement and for this international cooperation that you are demonstrating. I'm sure it will help you and your country and us all to engage in a just and inclusive and successful energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hauser, for your forward-looking perspectives and interesting ideas and calling on action to society and to SAIs. And now the panel number 1, it ends, and we're moving to panel 2. Panel 2 is called Multidimensional Poverty in the Context of Climate Change. And I would like to thank all the dignitaries and participants for joining us for our second panel discussion. This session will delve into the intricate relationship between poverty and climate change, highlighting how these issues intersect and exacerbate each other. Addressing multidimensional poverty is crucial for achieving sustainable development and as encompass various deprivations beyond income, such as education, health, and living standards, which are all affected by climate change. Supreme Audit Institutions play a pivotal role in this context. By auditing and evaluating public policies, SAIs ensure that resources allocated to combat poverty and climate change are used effectively and transparently, as Mr. Hauser recently mentioned. Their oversight fosters good governance, accountability, and trust, which is essential for implementing successful strategies to alleviate poverty and mitigate climate impacts. Through their work, SAIs contribute significantly to building resilient and equitable societies capable of meeting the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. On this panel, we will follow the same structure than in panel 1, so we will have a keynote speaker, our panelist presentation, and a closing remarks from our specialist speaker. And to begin, I would like to introduce to you to Dr. Sabina Alcaer, who will open our second panel. Dr. Alcaer is a poverty and human development professor at the University of Oxford and directs the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, OPHI. She previously worked at George Washington University, Harvard University, the Human Security Commission, and the World Bank. She has a DPhil in economics from the University of Oxford. Dr. Alcaer and Professor James Foster developed the Alcaer-Foster method for measuring multidimensional poverty, the MPI. This flexible technique can incorporate different dimensions or aspects of poverty to create measures tailored to each context. The MPI offers a tool to identify who is poor by considering the range of deprivations they suffer. It is used to report a headline figure of poverty, which can be unpacked to provide a detailed information platform for policy design, showing how people are poor nationally and how they are poor by areas, groups, and by each indicator. Dr. Alcaer was elected a Fellow of the Academy of Social Science in the UK in 2021 and was voted one of the Forbes magazine's top 100 thinkers in 2010. Dr. Alcaer will discuss the complexities of measuring multidimensional poverty and its relevance as a robust policy tool within the SDG framework. As a pioneer in poverty measurement, she will highlight how multidimensional poverty indices can incorporate climate-induced deprivations, aiding policymakers in designing targeted interventions. Dr. Alcaer, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much to SAI Brazil for this opportunity, and thank you for being here. I know for many people in the body clocks it's very late, and we've had a long day together, and this is the last session, but beginning much later. And so I thank you for being here, because I think the vision that SAI Brazil set out of using the Supreme Audit Institutions to look at poverty and hunger is historic. And the potential that you have to make a difference in real people's lives is real, it's tangible. And as somebody who only works on poverty, I can really appreciate the strategic value if SAI20 comes on board. So I want to thank you for being here. And what I will try to do is explain what multidimensional poverty is very briefly, how to measure it, jointly with climate variables, and give some examples of how these have been used, and I'll keep to time. So first of all, when we talk with poor men, women, and children, the protagonists of poverty, very often they say in their lives what they experience are overlapping deprivations. The house leaks, a child requires attention, they don't have secure employment, and they might themselves not be educated, so able to operate in ways that they otherwise could. And responses to poverty then often have to be multi-sectoral or integrated, so they address these deprivations together. Amartya Sen, Nobel Prize in Economics, observed that human lives are battered and diminished in many and various ways. And so if we want to measure poverty, then we need to look across these different disadvantages. And this has a human face, So briefly, what we do in multidimensional poverty measures is take a person, in this case Deepa in Bangladesh, who's a grandmother who lives with her husband and granddaughter, and their household is deprived because somebody is undernourished. They lack clean cooking fuel, adequate sanitation, clean drinking water, a house with solid materials, and they don't own more than one of a small set of assets. So those are their deprivations out of the 10 deprivations covered in the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, OFI release with UNDP for 6.1 billion people, 110 countries, 1,281 subnational regions, and we update it every year. So these data exist, the STATA-DO files are online, the data are online, decomposed, disaggregated by many units, and broken down by indicators. So Thelma Krug mentioned that some of the indicators of climate are difficult. In the case of poverty, whether it's this measure or the national measures I will introduce, the data exist to a fine level of detail. And what is missing is, in a sense, the auditing, the policy effectiveness analysis, and the use. So that's why this is very exciting for me. So I mentioned the global MPI. It is one of two broad types of multidimensional poverty. One is national. That is, it looks at the specific face of poverty, which is different in Mexico than Armenia, than Sierra Leone, than Vietnam, different countries with national MPIs. But they match the national development plans, the participatory exercises, and the priorities of the SDGs for that country. These become a permanent official statistics, and they are used to report indicator 1.2.2. The second kind of indicator is comparable. You can compare Armenia to Sierra Leone, to South Africa, to Vietnam. And the global multidimensional poverty measure that I explained in the case of Deepa from Bangladesh is a measure of that variety. I'll give some results later. And regional MPIs have also been published for the Arab states by UNESCO in collaboration with the League of Arab States, and for Latin America by Javier Mancero and ECLAC, and new regional measures are underway for Latin America because the global MPI is too acute for the Arab states or for Latin America, so they need more ambitious poverty indicators. So how are these measures being used by other bodies? First of all, I want to mention words from Sir Tony Atkinson, a very great and late beloved leader in poverty and inequality. And he observed that poverty statistics matter if they motivate people to tackle a key challenge, that we who work on measuring poverty cannot stop there. They need to go in and be linked to action. But also, relevant to SAI, statistics of poverty are a performance indicator. You can set targets, you can assess whether you've met them, how you've fallen short, how you've overachieved. And also that this role of performance monitoring using official statistics has become greater in the SDG era. So coming to some concrete examples, the third United Nations decade for the eradication of poverty from 2018 to 2027 uses the global MPI as one of their measures of poverty, recognizing that the poorest of the poor experience overlapping deprivations, and that we need multi-sectoral integrated policies, and also urging for more up-to-date data on multidimensional poverty. The World Bank led a study on monitoring global poverty, monetary and multidimensional, and it concluded that going forward, monetary and multidimensional poverty measures should both be used. Comparable and national measures for each country should be used as we monitor poverty trends. And the UN Secretary General appointed a group of scientists to write the Global Sustainable Development Report. adding their views on the SDGs. And these scientists also recognize the need to look at multidimensional poverty alongside climate, which is really the focus of our day today. In terms of the SDGs, what you know already is that the first of 17 goals is to end poverty, not only in monetary poverty, but poverty in all its forms. And the second of the 169 targets is on multidimensional poverty, as is the third out of 232 Sustainable Development Indicators. So monetary poverty, the first target, and the first two indicators, and multidimensional, have a prominence, a visibility in the SDGs. Thus far, I've spoken about multidimensional poverty using national MPIs and the global, and have not explained how these overlay with climate. So it happens differently in different countries. For example, I think I'm having some difficulties with the slides. If it's possible to go back 2 slides, that would be helpful. National multidimensional poverty indices, like that of Dominican Republic, include environmental variables, like if people live close to a river that floods, or if their children lack a place to play. In El Salvador, also, they include indicators of environment, esparcimiento. But it is also possible and necessary to include direct satellite data. Many household surveys, most now, know the geographic location of each household. So what we do in that case is we look at the satellite data for cyclones, for floods, for droughts, for forest fires, for forest loss, for air precipitate quality. And we are able then to merge the existence of a deprivation that struck the same household in the same time period as multidimensional poverty. So not only are these households poor, but they have experienced floods, droughts, fires, forest loss, air pollution, and so on. And we can add that in to a multidimensional poverty measure as an extra dimension and weight it and see who's poor. So in the slides, for example, there is the example of Madagascar, where we have different indicators that I mentioned merged with the household survey data. And just to give an example of what happens, this is one country among many, but in this country, poverty went up from 75.7 to 85.5% when we included only 5 environmental deprivations. But in the case of Madagascar, 9 of the 10 poorest provinces were also the most hard hit by the environmental climate disasters. And so we could see an overlap, very tangibly, map it below actually these levels down to the household levels. And this is quite powerful and can be done extensively. And so when we speak about multidimensional poverty in the rest of this presentation, it is using an MPI that could be augmented with environmental data for the same time period. Now, it is at the end of a long day, so I will be brief, but people who work on auditing and accounting are numbers people. And so I thought you might be interested in just a few slides to show why multidimensional poverty measures are perhaps interesting in an accounting framework or an auditing framework. And the reason is very simple, that what an MPI does is it isolates all of the deprivations experienced by poor people, and it weights and adds them up. And that the height of that stack of all the deprivations of all poor people is the MPI. So if any deprivation of any poor person goes down, poverty goes down. There's a one-to-one connection. And that means that when we look, we can see where poverty's gone down and by what indicator. So it's built on a matrix, for example, of 4 people, Maria, Flavio, Sonia, and João, and in this case, 4 indicators. And each person is identified as deprived or non-deprived. So there is a dichotomization of the variables. And you can see that the second person, Flavio, has 2 deprivations, the 4th person, Sonia, 4, and the last person, João, 1. And the top person, Maria, has none. So as you see in the database, for each household, there's extensive data that underlies poverty for 6.2 billion people. And the MPI focuses only on deprivations of the poor. So for example, if 1 deprivation doesn't constitute poverty, but 2 or more does, then João is not poor. And that deprivation is erased. But all deprivations of all poor people remain in the data set. And you can then see, on average, what proportion of deprivations poor people experience. 2/4 for Flavio and 4/4 for Sonia, so the average is 3/4. And that is the information that you need for the MPI. Because it is linear, you can also look vertically and look at the percentage of the population who are poor and deprived in health, half, or education and housing, 1/4 each, or work, half. So this is the last slide of methodology. How do you compute the measure? It's something that our littlest participant, I believe, could do, because I believe she knows addition and multiplication. So if you multiply the percentage of people who are poor, which is half, I won't put her on the spot right now, by the average intensity, which is 3/4, you'll get the MPI. If you take the mean of the matrix, 6 deprivations out of 16, so you count the orange boxes and they are 6, and the matrix of 4 people and 4 deprivations is 16. So if you take 6 by 16, that's the MPI. And if you sum or take the average of the censored deprivations, 2/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 2/4, then that's the MPI. So it's a very elementary index. But because of that transparency, it's very easy to see where poverty is going down, for whom, and in what indicator. And that makes it perhaps a useful tool of accountability. For example, let's say there's 1 deprivation that goes down for Sonia. She gets access to health care. Then intensity goes down. The percentage of the population poor in health go down, and the MPI goes down. And so in that way, you can track the intended effect of an expenditure and its actual effect on poverty. I'd like to close in my last 4.5 minutes with some quick examples. First, from G20 countries. Mexico was the first country to launch its MPI in 2009. It reports every 2 years, and in the last reporting phase, it had the biggest year-on-year reduction of MPI of any year to date. Mexico also disaggregates its MPI by indigenous and non-indigenous. So it's an example of disparity. In 2018, 39% of people were poor who were not indigenous, but among indigenous, it was 69%. That took political courage, but has been done in countries from Panama to Paraguay and others. South Africa was the earliest country to use the census for the South African MPI or SAMPI, which gives a very strong map of poverty at the lowest levels and will be updated with the 2022 census. India launched its MPI in 2021 and updated it in 2023 and showed a historic reduction of 10 percentage points in a mere 4.5 years between 2015-16 and 2019-21, and that goes down to the district level. In terms of the global multidimensional poverty index, as I mentioned, it covers this year 6.1 billion people. And sadly, 1.1 billion are poor. They are deprived in 1/3 or more of the weighted indicators I showed at the beginning of Bangladesh. Half of the poor are children, 2/3 live in middle-income countries. And this is a measure appropriate, as I said, in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia primarily. And it is a complement to monetary poverty. The height of these bars is the level of multidimensional. The black dots are the level of monetary. And you can see that they're not always the same. So you use both measures together to see poverty more clearly. But the real use is that you can go down to the very local levels. So in this example, the different world regions are on the left, and then you can go to a country level. Here, the countries of sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa being the second least poor. And then within Senegal, in the middle, down to the subnational regions. And each of those colors represents an indicator. So you can see the face of poverty, and that supports allocation of resources and budget design. India, by our global multidimensional poverty measure, which is 2 fewer indicators than India's official MPI, shows a historic reduction of 415 million people in 15 years, with the poorest groups having the fastest reduction. The next largest reduction in terms of number of people, of course, was China, which started with a much lower level of poverty, but has had huge progress from 2012 onwards. But 25 countries cut their global MPI in half by 15 years. It's not enough of 110 countries, but this is why I think it is possible with the engagement of SAI to accelerate progress in the countries that are not yet doing well and to celebrate progress where it is going well. And I think to acknowledge a gap, we at OFI in our research group work with governments, with ministers of planning, ministers of finance, ministers of social development, with presidents, vice presidents, and prime ministers. And they recognize that poverty requires leadership. But I think the work of SAI alongside is to bring transparency, accountability, to underscore success where it is justified, and to raise questions where they need to be raised. This is a book by Nobel Peace Prize laureate Juan Manuel Santos, documenting Colombia's reduction during the 8 years of his presidency. And our next meeting of a South-South network that he, together with Professor Amartya Sen, launched, that many countries here present are participating in, and that Bangladesh, South Africa, China, and Colombia are on the steering committee for. Our next meeting is in Uzbekistan. And we also have meetings at General Assembly and in other events. And we hope in future that SAI ministers will join these events. So that is, in a sense, what I'd like to share. And I'm very grateful for your staying with me at the end of a long day. But I am really hopeful going forward that this engagement, so wisely advised in Indonesia and in India last year, and then in Brazil under the leadership of Minister Dantas, does actually result in something actionable, and that this will accelerate the lives of so many. And they are not in this room, but I think that we all would be very satisfied if that occurred. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akayer, for your insightful presentation and for introducing us this measuring of multidimensional poverty. And continuing on this topic, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Javier Mancero. He's the head of the UN Economic Commission for Latin America, the ECLAC, the Social Statistic Unit. Mr. Mancero is an economist from the University of San Francisco in Quito, in Ecuador. He also has a master's degree in economics from the University of Houston and extensive experience in social statistics and economics. He has worked at the Economic Commission for Latin America, ECLAC, since 2001, and since 2015, he has held the position of head of the Social Statistic Unit at the Statistics Division. He coordinated the update of the ECLAC's methodology for measuring monetary poverty, published in 2018, and led the development of a multidimensional poverty index for Latin America. He is also the coordinator of activities at the Statistical Conference of the Americas and its working groups. Mr. Mancero brings a solid academic background to his work, and his expertise in data analysis, research, and statistical methodologies has made him an asset in social statistics. Mr. Mancero's presentation will focus on using the multidimensional approach to measure poverty in Latin America, which is crucial for addressing the region's challenges in the context of climate change. He will also present the MPA-LA, highlighting key well-being dimensions and complementing income poverty data. His presentation will cover the preliminary estimates, the evolution of MPA-LA, and the region's poverty heterogeneity. Mr. Mancero will also explore the influence of climate change on poverty, referencing ECLAC studies. Mr. Mancero, the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, a big thank you to SAI Brazil for the invitation. It's a great honor to be in this meeting and also sharing with the panelists today in this table. I will give you a brief overview of the work that we have done at ECLAC regarding this regional measurement of multidimensional poverty that Dr. Sabine Alcaire mentioned in one of her slides. And at the end, try to make a link with the issue of climate change that is also the subject of this meeting. So, as was already presented, the idea of multidimensional poverty indices is to capture deprivations in different dimensions of well-being, going beyond the concept of poverty as low income. And from the many countries that have now official poverty measurements around the world, a quarter of them is in Latin America. This has been a very active region in the adoption of MPIs, of official measures of poverty, multidimensional poverty. So my institution, which is one of the 5 economic commissions for economic and social development from the UN, it's for one of the regions, Latin America and the Caribbean, has had a long tradition of working with poverty measurement. It is still income poverty, which is one of the indicators that the institution publishes regularly. But we also started doing a regional MPI. The first one was published 10 years ago. The idea of having a specific MPI for the region is because the lack of comparability of national MPIs, even though they are essential for policies but are not comparable across countries, and also something that was presented also recently, that the fact that the global MPI standards are rather low for the Latin American reality. So our first index was published 10 years ago, and we are currently developing a new index, which is to be published later this year in collaboration with UNDP. And we are currently in a discussion, consultation process with some countries, with OFI, and we've also had a long and enriching discussion with the different divisions of the different areas within our own institution to arrive at this. I will skip these 2 slides. Okay, if I refer to the index that was published 10 years ago, it included a combination of different kinds of deprivations. Some of them were already known as non-monetary deprivation indicators because of a tradition that in Latin American countries of measuring the unmet basic needs method, in which using mostly the population censuses, you could identify several needs regarding housing, regarding water availability, sanitation system, and school attendance of children. In this indicator, which is based on household surveys, we also included other indicators such as lack of energy and employment and social protection, which is one of the distinguishing characteristics of this regional indicator with respect to the global indicator. So, just to give you a brief overview of the kind of indicators and deprivations that were considered at that time, you have these 5 dimensions of well-being, and for each one you have 2 or 3 indicators. What did we learn at that time with the information that was available is that there was a large heterogeneity of multidimensional poverty within the region. You had countries with incidences below 10% and others reaching almost 70%. And that there had been a downward trend in the region regarding multidimensional poverty. But nevertheless, the figures were still too high. And when you looked at the differences between, for example, urban and rural areas, you also see very big differences, in which rural areas can have more than 50, 60, or even 80% of poverty rate of the incidence. The update on which we are working now changes a bit the structure that I presented before. It considers 4 dimensions and 12 indicators, and it is proposed as a complementary index to the monetary poverty. The other one, integrated monetary poverty, this one is strictly complementary. However, recognizing that to identify the preventions in some dimensions of well-being, income is important to take into account. For example, when you are evaluating the quality of employment or old age pensions, if they are enough or not for people who receive them, for the elderly population. So this is more or less the structure of the indicator that will be published soon, but I will not enter into much details. Nevertheless, some preliminary results that we can comment from now is that poverty, multidimensional poverty, has continued its downward trend since 2008, except in 2020, the year of the pandemic. But numbers are still too high. The region is far away from meeting the target of eradicating described earlier is still to be found. You can also see that the deprivations in all of the dimensions that have been considered contribute to this situation of being in poverty, and some of them have a bit higher impacts on the final figures. For example, the precarious employment, the lack of internet access, and overcrowding. And also that people in income poverty and multidimensional poverty are not necessarily the same. In fact, the population that is poor by both methods is lower than the population that is poor by one method and not by the other. So it is very important to have this complementary perspective, because the kind of policies that you need to address these different manifestations of poverty are different. So now, making the link to climate change, ECLAC has a whole area devoted to analyzing the climate change and working towards policies on that regard. There is a recent report from last year that summarizes some of the evidence of the impact of climate change in the region. You can see that, for example, temperature has increased by between 0.7 Celsius degrees and 1 Celsius degree with respect to the 1960 to 1980 average. That there is a measure of the days of exposure to heat waves that has increased. That there's already a loss of 30% of glacier surface area since the 80s. There are longer and more intense drought episodes, and there has been an increase in forest fires and spread of vector-borne diseases. This is all some things that are happening now. There's evidence about them. And there are also different estimates showing the impact on per capita GDP, which would be a decline between 0.8% and 6.3% by 2030. And also there are some estimations regarding the impact on monetary poverty, in which the number of poor people could increase in about 12 million by 2030. So when we think about the relationship between multidimensional poverty and climate change, we can see that the current index, not just the one that I presented, but many of the indices that are used around the world, are able to capture some of the effects, direct effects on poverty. For example, an obvious effect is the increase in housing deprivations due to flooding, fires, etc. Also, the loss in school attendance and in education opportunities due to infrastructure damage to schools or the difficulty of accessing the school. And when we include also this dimension of labor within the index, we will also find an increase in labor deprivations due to loss of jobs, for example, in agriculture, or also the loss of labor income. So the indices, such as they exist right now, can be very useful to inform strategic policy interventions necessary to mitigate the adverse impacts of climate change and promote sustainable development. There are also some challenges to better capture the impact of climate change on poverty and to improve that relation on the measures that we have. One of them is having additional indicators, because climate change poses other risks related to other dimensions of well-being that are not included, for example, in the index that I just presented, such as food insecurity or the increase in vector-borne diseases. These are not considered right now because of the lack of information. We need a survey, a household survey, that includes in the same instrument information from the different areas, dimensions of well-being. And this is something that is necessary if we want to have a more complete picture. And the other issue is the geographical focus, because in many occasions the impact of climate change is often perceived only in very specific geographical areas. So when we look at the national average, we may not notice the impact, because there might be a reduction of poverty in part of the country and an increase in the other part, but the average won't show that. So there's a need also for more disaggregated information, and this possibility of linking georeferenced survey data that Sabine Alcaer just showed, linking it with geospatial information is very important to take into account the impact of climate change. So an additional message that I would like to convey in this last minute is that for the Supreme Audit Institutions, whenever it is possible to support the development of these instruments, of the household surveys and the necessary instruments to measure multidimensional poverty, to encourage you to support that initiatives, because otherwise we can only get a partial picture of the issue that we're trying to measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Javier, for sharing ECLAC's efforts to implement this LA MPI. I would like just to send some regards to who are looking for these presentations by the streaming that is being presented by YouTube at this moment. And to continue, I would like to introduce to you to Ms. Nina Rentel, who represents the civil society organization called Gerando Falcões. Ms. Rentel is Director of Social Technology at the NGO Gerando Falcões, which specializes in community development solutions and combating multidimensional poverty. Nina inspires many young Brazilians looking to make a social impact in their communities. Her dedication and hard work at Gerando Falcões have helped change the lives of many young people and build a better future for communities in situations of socio-economic vulnerability in Brazil. During her presentation, she will showcase the work of Gerando Falcões, collaborating with 2,500 local leaders, which they focus on eradicating poverty through education, economic growth, and citizenship services. She will also present other interesting initiatives Gerando Falcões is carrying out currently, like the Favela 3D program. Ms. Rentel, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you, and thank you also everybody who's staying with us for so late. Gerando Falcões, I want to share with you a little bit of how we've been working with multidimensional poverty in favelas of Brazil over the past 12 years. Our mission, as our founder has written it before, is to end poverty in Brazil's favela before Mars is colonized. So we want to be able to be provocative about the investment and the knowledge and all the, the pact that we could create to first resolve our issues in Brazil before we look at other planets. We started off in a favela in the eastern part of São Paulo, and now we are an NGO ecosystem. We have formed over 2,000 leaders that have project and create social impact in their favelas in all of the states of Brazil. We are now impacting over 5,000 favelas along with our leaders, and we impact over 700,000 people directly with the programs that we implement with our network. And with the Favela 3D program, we are already in 10 favelas, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this program specifically. Through our history and with the network, we've been creating new technologies to fight poverty in favelas and other social vulnerable communities in Brazil. Our first technology is the social leader network. So we have a university, our Falcons University, where we form leaders to be able to manage the NGO and also create more impact. Our Favela 3D program, which aims to end poverty in favelas in a span of 2 to 3 years. Our Takeoff program, which is our own poverty graduation program, where we try to guarantee that all the families in our program are actually leaving poverty and achieving a level of dignity. And our micro franchises, where we learned that women specifically need new type of economic solutions for them to be able to generate income no matter in what context they are located in. The Favela 3D is our project to create digital, dignified, and developed favelas in Brazil. It's ambitious, but we try to connect social transformation with infrastructure transformation. We understand that we have to tackle the infrastructure part in favelas, but it needs to be accompanied by social transformation. What we do is we connect public policies, solutions from other NGOs, solutions that already exist in the favelas, and also the private sector, to together create a great plan of 2 to 3 years of actions that will be able to transform the whole scenario. For that, we created our social impact mandala. It's our very own multidimensional poverty view. It's very much based on everything that has already been put here. But we try to bring our knowledge from the favelas and our knowledge from all of our social leaders in our network to understand what are exactly the things that we need to change and we have to change in each of the favelas for us to be able to end poverty in in each of the territories. So we bring into the discussion of multidimensional poverty the territorial part. So we look at one favela and we will be able to create a plan to tackle all the issues that exist there, and we do it along with local governments. So basically we are helping local governments to understand their issues in their favelas and create an action plan where the local government can be more efficient with where they're investing and where they're putting their public policies along with our solutions. So we look at housing and urbanism, health, citizenship and culture of peace, education, early childhood, women empowerment, culture, sports and leisure, and income generation, which is a very large part of the program. And in a more transversal view, we bring environment to the community level of the discussion. So everything that we do would be in vain if we have great environmental emergencies happening in the favelas. So we have to try to bring the environmental petals into the whole mandala and create more resilient favelas in the cities that we work with. And that we translate into our own index is our way to understand how we are able to impact the favelas. So very quickly you can understand how the vulnerability level of one favela is at and what pedal we should tackle before, first, and where we need to invest more to be able to bring the population from extreme poverty to dignity. In this way we can also compare the favelas that we work with and create insights of what solutions we have been able to implement and that actually work to change the mandala, and also we can bring this to the local government to together understand what public policies are working or not. In practice, what we're doing is for each petal we connect the solutions that each favela needs. So for income we're talking about creating jobs, connecting startups that are bringing new economic solutions to the favelas. We're also creating new economic solutions for the women. In housing and urbanism, we are doing housing improvement project, but also constructing new houses from scratch, creating new spaces, and bringing basic infrastructure solutions to the favelas. In health, we're connecting telemedicine solutions with the favelas, but also making sure that the population is able to access our health system. With education, we're working with local governments to guarantee that all the adults can read and can do basic math, and ensure that all the youth and children are in school. In early childhood, we're also guaranteeing that all the infants can be in a child care institution, and working with more social solutions to make sure that all the adults in the favela are able to accompany the development of the children. For women's empowerment, we are working with creating social networks for the women, creating spaces for women's empowerment, and make sure that they are able to generate their own income. Culture, sports, and leisure, we're bringing them to the favela, but also connecting the youth and the families of the favelas with cultural solutions in the city, where they're most likely not accessing for many reasons. Citizenship and culture of peace, we're working on a very basic level of citizenship. We're talking about guaranteeing that everyone has their documents, that everybody knows what their rights are and are able to access it, and also social participation throughout the whole process so that they can reach a level of autonomy after the project is done. And at last, Pedal 9 for the environment, we have been able to work in emergencies, which is not the best scenario, but we're also working with solutions to create more resilient favelas, with solutions for sanitation, but also drainage systems so that the flood is less, and using spaces for green and solutions is just a couple of them. Also solar panel with energy transition solutions that are also able to bring down the bills that they have to pay for water and for energy. So what we're doing is, with the collaboration of government, private sector, and the civil society, we are creating new favelas where we are able to take out the poverty and leave all the potential, creating spaces that are very different, but also populations that come from 72% of unemployment to 5% of unemployment in some of our favelas. And we are able to do this big change because of our take-up program. It's just a very quick overview I want to show you. We do a very personalized approach to the families in the favela. We create personalized journeys, and our mentors will use our technology to accompany the families in 1 to 2 years in their journey to overcome poverty and create a sustainable level of dignity so that they will be more resilient to economic shocks and other shocks that can happen, and they will be able to bring themselves out of poverty again. So the same mandala will be read for the family, and In an example, our family in São Paulo, we were able to connect the families to the solutions they needed, so education for the adults, for the children, women's empowerment, and also income generation with a formal job. And now they're able to reinvest their income generation in the continuing development of the family as they wish. And with this continuing approach, only with the Favela 3D and our takeoff program, we're able to generate a lot of information that help us make the best decisions and help us also assist governments in making the best decisions for the favelas in their cities or in their states. So what we can do is we have a very viewer-friendly way to analyze how we are looking at each petal of our mandala in each favela, and we can discuss the same issues with local populations, with our leaders and with the government to understand what we're doing right and what we have to adjust to be able to bring the whole favela to dignity. We're happy that our programs in the first pilot have been able to bring massively all the family to a new level of dignity. We are able to guarantee 100% of the families out of extreme poverty, and we are now reaching 60 to 70% of the families being able to leave poverty. I hope this is able to share just a little bit of practice and what the social society in Brazil has been doing with the theoretical part of multidimensional poverty in favelas, and it might also inspire of how we can connect high-level discussions with the territory where everything actually happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rinkel, for sharing with us the efforts Gerando Falcone is carrying out to tackle poverty in Brazilian favelas. And to close this panel, the panelists' presentations, I would like to introduce to you to Her Excellency Tsakani Maluleke. She's the Auditor General of South Africa and the first woman to be appointed in this role in over 100 years. Before this, she served as a Deputy Auditor General. She has over 20 years of experience spanning diverse areas, including auditing, consulting, corporate advisory, development finance, investment management, and skills development. A seasoned business leader with a wealth of corporate governance experience gained through participation on numerous corporate boards and strategic committees in both the private and public sectors. Her commitment to service excellence, ethical leadership, and contribution to the advancement of transformation have been recognized by the presidents of the Black Management Forum, BMF, the African Women Chartered Accountants, the Black Business Council, and the Association for the Advancement of Black Accountants of Southern Africa, of which she is a past president. The Auditor General of South Africa presentation will showcase experiences overseeing public policies related to multidimensional poverty and climate change. Ms. Maluleke will underscore the vital role of Supreme Audit Institutions in upholding good governance by facilitating efficient public oversight over poverty and climate governmental policies. Mr. Maluleke, please.
Thank you very much. Let me congratulate you, Chair of this forum, for holding it together right up until this time of the day. I think you're doing a fantastic job. I'd like to greet all of your excellencies that are here present, all the ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be part of this forum. I have listened with great interest to the different inputs from our different experts, and I think many of your inputs will stay with me for a long time. So thank you very much. When I was thinking about this discussion, it really is quite clear to me that it's a subject matter that is a significant part of what should really worry all of us as Supreme Audit Institutions. If I look at my country, if I look at the continent from which I hail, if I look at the world all over, it really is an issue that we must all contend with. And if you think about the context of our Inter-SAI Principle Statement 12, the value and benefits of SAIs, making a difference to the lives of citizens. That's what we all said we would do, right? This should be our collective concern, to meaningfully contribute towards reversing the trend of persistent accountability failures, persistent performance failures by many public institutions that have been given specific mandates to contribute to reversing poverty, and making sure that every public institution is delivering on its mandate and in turn making a solid and sustainable contribution to improving the lives of people across generations. At the AJSA, we've drawn inspiration from that very mandate, from that very value and benefits aspirational document, but we've also drawn our inspiration from our constitutional mandate, which requires of us to audit independently and to report in a way that does support improvements in accountability, governance, and performance of public institutions. What we've done is we've then gone ahead and actually tested ourselves. We asked ourselves, look, beyond the debits and credits, what does the Supreme Audit Institution actually exist for? We are a well-established institution, 3,700 people that work within the office. As you've said, it's over 100 years old, with significant investments made by South African taxpayers, generations of South African taxpayers, high level of professionalism, and tremendous track record. But we then said to ourselves, it's well and good to look good as a SAI, but can you just have a look at what the country looks like? And what does that instruct you to do? So when I began my tenure as Auditor General, having been in the institution for a considerable period already, we took information from Stats SA, whom you engage with, Sabina. By the way, Sabina showed you a picture of our statistician general, a very esteemed member of our society. You might have noticed he has the same surname as me. I want to be clear, he's not my husband. Some people keep thinking that. We belong to the same clan. So culturally and from a heritage point of view, he's a brother, but we're not from the same bloodline, just to clarify. But we took data even from them and we said, have a look at where South Africa is. High levels of poverty, high levels of infrastructure problems and underinvestment and poor quality investment when it does happen. Significant investment in our education drive so that you can deal with poverty, quality outcomes questionable. Significant investment in our healthcare. If you look at the allocation from a budgetary point of view, quite high allocation on healthcare, but the outcomes are not always commensurate with that investment. We look carefully at the notion of what's happening with local government. We look carefully at what happens with housing. Again, a journey started from the government that was led by the late, great Nelson Mandela to drive investment in housing and providing people with homes. Questions about the quality of that spend. Adequacy might be one thing, but real questions about the quality of that spend. So we really looked at what's really happening, and beyond the debits and credits, what does this then instruct us to do? We looked at our state-owned entities, really poorly managed. We look at the state of governance and asked the question of how do these governance failures translate to these poor lived experiences of the majority of South Africans? Because what we're seeing is poverty continues to grow, and it is multi-generational in its impact, despite all these investments. What we're seeing is unemployment continues to grow, and inequality continues to broaden and deepen. And the question was, what is the role of every public institution that we audit, given the budgets that are allocated to them, and what does that mean for a Supreme Audit Institution? We then said to ourselves, well, we have the joy or the benefit of auditing every single public sector institution in the country, and we do so every single year. That's why we have 3,700 people. And when we audit, we're supposed to look at financial information, which is a performance report, as well as compliance issues. Then we asked ourselves, given that we see everybody every single year, what should we be doing differently? So we said, you know, our dream as the auditor, the supreme auditor within the country, our dream is to have a much stronger, much more direct and consistent impact on improving the lives of citizens. That's basically P12, okay? Then we said, how could we do it? We diagnosed that the governance arrangements in our country are generally quite strong, quite exemplary in terms of what, by design, everyone should be able to do, should be doing. Our budget allocation process is exemplary. Our budget oversight processes are quite exemplary. So we asked, what is the reason for the failure? What we diagnosed was that, well, there are far too many individual public institutions that are not doing their job. They're not performing on their mandate. And we said, well, if you can start to move more of them from doing badly to actually performing, that's where the magic will happen. If through our audits we can give enough information as to where the failures are, and give enough inspiration and influential conversation to drive improvements, if we can use our powers of enforcement, because we have additional powers to go and refer matters for investigations, to give stronger recommendations, and even ultimately issue a certificate of debt, which is a sanction, a surcharge. What can we do, given all of the powers and resources we have, to shift individual performance of institutions, the transparency of every institution, the accountability of every institution, and therefore the institutional integrity of every institution? If we can change that culture, and given that we see everyone, meet with everyone in that ecosystem of accountability regularly, give them insight, influence their choices and behaviors, so that ultimately we get everyone to act differently, we can start to win the game. And then we said, if we look at the SDGs and the global aspirations that have been set, if we look at what happens within our continent around the agenda that's been set by the AU, and if we look at our national imperatives, what are the things that are critical? Because we audit all of government. We were able to identify that themes are about infrastructure failures, safety and security problems, environmental sustainability, education, health, and then fiscal pressures, which we saw, and then we also identified that there are other institutions that should be supporting. So we selected water and sanitation, which will ring a bell from what you've done, human settlements, roads and transport, health, and energy as our key sectors. So when we audit those value chains, we look carefully at the performance on mandate of every institution. And what we're finding is that it's inspired our teams to learn more and more about the work we do, the work of those institutions, but it also helps us to give much better recommendations. I'll just give a couple of examples. Maybe let me do it this way. Let's go back a little bit. Okay, I think I wanted to go back. Can somebody, oh, there. Haha, okay. Just a couple of examples. So what we did was we said to our auditors, when you audit, look beyond the debits and credit, get proximate, go to a wastewater treatment plant, because that's where the failure on performance is. Figure out who's not doing their part, and make sure you give the type of recommendation that's going to make sure that there are improvements. Things like saying, well, we're noticing that your wastewater treatment plants are not being maintained. That's driving sanitation problems, which is a dignity issue and a real deprivation, and that's driving an environmental harm because effluent is running into the river. And then we're able to get everyone in the ecosystem to do their part. We said, well, municipality, you're failing in this duty. We're going to report you to your oversight committee. We're also reporting you to the minister responsible for overseeing you. Dear minister responsible, what are the things that you need to do so that systematically you perform on your mandate, so that everything becomes more and more reinforcing. On health, for example, it's easy as the auditor to say, you're not managing your medicines appropriately. You're not rotating your stock. And that's easy for an auditor to say and see. Some of the things my teams are able to tell me now is because they understand the importance of giving credible, workable, implementable recommendations. They go and sit with the nurses in a public health care facility, and they say to them, okay, let me explain to you what it means to rotate your stock. When you give out this medicine, write it down. That's minus. And then when you get more stock at the end of the day, add. And that's how you're able to build the basic disciplines that over time can help you manage better efficiency of how you work with your pharmaceutical stock. The reason this is important is that it's allowed our teams to get clearer about what type of recommendations they give. And it's allowed the institutions to benefit from insight that's not theoretical, that's not debits and credits, but insight that's independent, that's relevant, that's credible, and that is of value in the moment. I've just given you two little examples just to give you a sense of the type of things we are doing as a SAI to operate differently. I'll leave you just with one point. In our observation, certainly in South Africa, the resources are being applied in a way, from a theoretical point of view, are being applied in a way that should push back on poverty in all its dimensions. What we're seeing is that institutional failures are making it difficult for the benefits to roll through to the citizen. And what we're now doing is to push ourselves as auditors to say, beyond every debit and credit, what sits behind this finding you might say about leakage of pharmaceuticals, the finding you might say about school nutrition programs that are not being procured properly. Our teams can now go to school and see that children are not getting the food that they should from a quality point of view. And you don't get that insight unless you're proximate. What that has allowed the Minister of Education to do is to drive improvements and to have specific rules about the type of formula that should apply to the nutritional value of food being given to children. That's important because it allows children to have that meal being of good quality, and you prevent stunting, you improve learning, and you ultimately improve your human capital across a generation. Just a few examples of how we've approached our work as SAI South Africa in response to what we've diagnosed as the real barrier between the aspirations, the allocations, and reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maluleke, for this upholding good governance by facilitating, by sharing what the AXA is doing in terms of trying to tackle climate change and poverty. And to close this panel, I would like to introduce you again, Mr. Philip Hauser, who will give us some final remarks. Philip.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I try to be brief because it's getting unsustainable to hold you up for much longer. But due to the importance of multidimensional poverty, I think it is very important that we highlight that it is effectively not acceptable that we go beyond the environmental boundaries of our planet while we are wasting resources and still not satisfying the necessities of our societies. Fighting poverty is therefore an urgency, but I think it's important that we not see it as an independent objective. It is an intrinsic opportunity and necessity of our political system, of our institutions, and of the design of our economy. We cannot have a philanthropic approach to compensate for flawed policies. And as was said before, the way we organize the energy transition can be a better way to also cure for pre-existing distortions. I want to share some experiences that I made in Latin America. I mapped out the renewable energy potential in our region, and it is located in the regions with the least human development index. There is a correlation between poverty and potential for renewable energies such as wind, solar, hydro. We talk about regions with very low education, sanitation, income, health, and economic opportunities. Bringing renewable energy investments there is an opportunity to use them as a vector for fast-forwarding sustainable development goals, but it can also be a huge problem for investors and for societies. I have seen marvelous projects and great successes where communities and individuals benefited from the programs that came with those projects. Young people that had opportunities that they would not have had without. Simple problems like access to water that were solved as a consequence of those projects. Unfortunately, I have also seen projects where we had huge expenditure for social environmental compensation, often imposed by public authorities with little regards for the real necessities of local communities. This is private money, badly spent, and thus a lost opportunity for a better future. For investors, this is also a problem. It's very hard for them to estimate how much they will be spending on social environmental compensation. What is worst is that this uncertainty may prompt them to not do these investments or to charge a much higher cost. And that would then even be a more difficult problem for our energy transition. So what we need is that we have a better planning, and I like how Sabina Alkaya and Mr. Mancedo have exposed the methodologies. If we do those diagnoses, if we look at the necessities, the vulnerabilities also to climate change of those regions, and then conceive the policies that we need to implement these projects in a way that they can be a vector for a better regional development, then we really have a win-win, we have an alignment, and we can use the fast growth, the fast expansion of wind, solar, and hydro, or forestry projects as a vector for better development. What we need are sound rules, sound methodologies, and the cooperation of all levels of government and also NGOs, like, for example, Gerando Falcões, to make sure that with these vectors we have this comprehensive, positive, enabling environment that will bring social progress and bring us out of poverty. With that, I have another small comment to make, which is that we also need to do international cooperation. We need to be open for international trade. Many countries, such as Brazil, Latin America, but also Africa and Asia, have outstanding renewable energy resources, agricultural land and forests, also minerals that we need, but they don't have the capital to develop them. We need international foreign direct investment to make those projects, to make those minerals available. But this has to come together with sound references for environmental protection and sound sustainable standards. We need a race to the top and not a race to the bottom. And I think the Supreme Audit Institutions also have a role to make sure that we supervise and control not only domestic policies, but also the discussion for international standards, so that international trade can be a vector for good, for poverty eradication, and for an increasing alignment in social environmental standards. With that, I would like to close. Thank you very much for your patience, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in the evening and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser, and a big thanks to all our speakers and panelists for their valuable insights and expertise sharing today. And to give us a final address and some interesting and important information, I want to call Ms. Raisa Ayala, Director of International Cooperations from TCU.
Thank you all the panelists. Thank you, Osvaldo, for moderating this wonderful panel with all this information. I would like to share with you that the slides will be uploaded to our website, and also this whole event was recorded to YouTube, so you can have a chance to look at it and share it with your teams. These panelists have brought us a lot of information. We need to digest this, and we plan to also engage with them in the second semester to proceed with our work plan. Another important information is that the buses are now leaving to the hotels, and then at 7:30 they will be at the hotels to take you to the cocktail event. Also the panelists are invited, so you can discuss the themes further at the cocktail event. And last, and I know you're going to like this news, information is that tomorrow we are trying to have a little bit higher temperature here, so don't worry, the plan is not to freeze you in Brazil in this event. I know it was a little bit colder. I would like the panelists to stay. We want to take a picture of all of you, and thank you everyone. See you tonight at the cocktail event.